February the 1st, 2018, and invite you to join us in the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In case of fire, there are two ways to exit the chambers. To my left, you exit through the double doors, turn left, walk down a flight of stairs, and out of the building. Or the best way is at the rear of the chambers through the double doors, down the stairs, and once you're outside of the building, please walk a safe distance away from the building. Secretary, please take the roll.
Charles Duran.
Present.
Charles Ladd.
Here.
Nick Lefakis.
Here.
Mary Scott.
Here.
Virginia Higley.
Here.
Ken Nelson.
Here.
Linda DeGray.
Here.
Sarah Gruber.
Here.
Guillermo Salazar is absent, and Rich Suzak is here.
Okay. Staff reports, town attorney is on your desk. Any questions for the managers through that? I understand we have three maybe going to the attorneys or with the judge.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good.
At least.
Did you tell them?
Before?
Did you tell them? Yeah, I'm going.
Oh,
You weren't on the
all right.
list.
So that's very
Oh,
good.
sorry.
Okay.
Are you going to, Rich?
Yes.
Oh, very
Got a whole
good.
committee going.
Very
I don't.
good.
I don't think
Thank
they
you.
know.
I thought they were gonna get the dial-a-ride bus, so I figured it wouldn't make any difference.
The other, it does not concern us, well, it had been, I guess, or would have come to us if it gets through or what happens. And the next, any questions to the town attorney through the planner? Okay. Zoning enforcement officer is on your desk. I'm going to take a quick reading of it, or if you have any questions on it, and it's not covered here.
We could take it up in the director of planning's report later in the
Okay.
meeting if you want.
Fine, then we'll do that. Approval of minutes. We have some, I know you're hindered up there, but we've got to do better. A lot of us rely on these as notes of what happened and what we take care of in the next meeting. And having them like this is not good. I don't know, the council doesn't put up with it. I don't know why we have to. But I guess we have for quite a while now. Any additions, errors, or omissions for let's see, what date is this?
The 16th?
The 16th, November.
Make a motion to approve the minutes for November 16th.
Second,
Motion's made and seconded. Now, are there any errors or omissions? I have one on page 16. It's not, it's just, let's see if you can find it. Just, four lines up. Chairman Duran stated that the downtown Townsville storm sewers are once receiving water from property in the area it should be. It's not from the property we're talking about. There was these storm leaders from the roofs were going into the sanitary sewers. Yeah, and they were causing problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I had asked whether or not that had been corrected yet, and he said they weren't getting as much as they had been. But, so just knock out the, and the word and, or after and put the, in the area. With that one correction, all in favor?
Wait, I have one more.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, and just a clarification, on page 17, the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth paragraph from the bottom says Commissioner Ladd asked if there would be a planned maintenance program. There was no answer to that noted in our notes, and I was just wondering if on the tape there was or in the minutes. So I don't know. Good, thank you.
Anything further? Okay, with the corrections, all in favor? Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstentions, and one abstention. 6-0-1. Okay, December 7. Motion would be in order.
Motion to approve the minutes from December 7th. Do you have-
Motion's made and seconded. Any errors, omissions, additions?
I have
Yes.
one question, again, to be consistent with our previous notes. First page, Director O'Brien, and usually when we talk about you for the first time, it's Dr. O'Brien, and then we're going back, trying to decide, what are we going to call you? Doctor, Director, you, Roger, so I think just for consistency, we need to make some kind of decision on how we want.
I did think we corrected those on the
Yeah.
ones you get for the next two meetings. I think we corrected.
All right, great, thanks.
Yeah, on that same page, in terms of just the next paragraph up, in terms of I read the legal notice, not Charlie Duran.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. I haven't done that in quite a while.
Then on page 2, again, your director, not Mr., so if we could just get you consistent, and I think throughout those whole minutes you were director.
I'd
O'Brien.
prefer if I wasn't even in the minutes.
Well, you're in them, so.
We can say
What do we do about that? Okay. Anything further?
On page 3, top, second paragraph down from the top, had the applicant purchased with a D after purchase.
Oh, I didn't anything further. I didn't know she'd finished. Okay. Anything further? Hearing none, all in favor with the additions or corrections?
Abstain.
One abstention. Thank you. 6-0-1.
Okay.
We're moving too fast. I can't keep up with it. Okay.
That's what Don is.
Just for your information, our current clerk has taken on the wetlands and the ZBA commissions as well, which I think is going to be a huge help.
Absolutely.
When she came on, as you know, we didn't have clerks for the whole first half of the year.
How
And,
well we know.
and
yes.
so when the clerk came on, and then we were given a clerk for wetlands and ZBA that after one meeting quit both. So it is a difficult assignment, and I think we're making progress on it, and things should improve.
Okay, good, thank you. At this point of the meeting, Planning and Zoning Commissioners welcome comments, concerns, and opinions relating to planning and zoning in Enfield from anyone who is present, provided no one may discuss any matter of business at this time that is already elsewhere on this agenda, any matter that's part of an open public hearing of the commission, or any matter where a decision of the commission is pending. Is there anyone who'd like to address the commission under those conditions? Anyone would like to address the commission under those conditions? Last call to address the commission under those conditions. Hearing none, we'll move on to bond releases. There weren't any in the packet? No. Okay, so any no old business and new business public hearing. Public hearing 2897. Secretary, please take the roll and read the legal notice.
Charles Duran.
Here.
Charles Ladd.
Here.
Nick Lefakis.
Here.
Mary Scott.
Here.
Virginia Higley.
Here.
Ken Nelson.
Here.
Linda DeGray.
Here.
Sarah Gruber.
Here.
And Rich Suzak is here.
Okay.
The Enfield Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing on Thursday, February 1st, 2018 at 7 p.m. in the Town Hall Council Chambers, 820 Enfield Street, Enfield, Connecticut, concerning the following application. Public hearing 2897, 34 Park Street, special permit application to expand a non-conforming use. Owner applicant James Wood, map 92, lot 83, residential 33, R33 zone. Dated this 20th day of January 2019, Charles Duran, Chairman. Information is available at the Enfield Planning and Zoning Office.
Okay, before we start, I'll read this in for the record. This is emails that have gone back and forth. Like the Tuesday, January 30th is this response or request. And this is addressed to our planner, Dr. O'Brien. Roger, I spoke to the client. He's contacted Health District to deal with the cited issues. We request an extension accordingly. We are assuming that this can be done without the need for our appearance. Please confirm. Thanks, Tom. This is from, on the same date, from Dr. O'Brien to the attorney, Thomas Fahey. And it says, yes, just confirm that you're granting a 35-day extension. And this is from the attorney, Thomas Fahey, dated Tuesday, January 30th at 2:28 p.m. Yes, we are granting a 35-day extension. Thanks, Tom. That means if there's anyone here that wishes to address the commission on this matter, you may do so, but just be aware that the presentation will not be tonight. But we will take anything that you have to say and make it part of the record. I do have to open it since it was advertised. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor or against this application? Anyone in the audience would like to speak in favor or against the application? Last call at this time to speak in favor or against the application. Hearing none, a motion would be in order to grant the extension of 35 days. And Roger, is no date definite with him, or it's indefinite?
No, there's no date, but you need to continue it from one meeting to the next, or
Okay,
unless you,
well,
so.
First is the order to grant the extension.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to grant an extension of 35 days, and added to that would be the next it would be on the next meeting. All in favor of the extension? Any opposed? It's unanimous. Okay, public hearing 2879, 91 Simon.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we continue public hearing.
Well, that was part of it before. What do you do?
You did them both?
That's all right.
I just wanted to make sure we did. Maybe I was freezing out.
No, that's fine. As long as Roger says it's all right. Okay, 91 Simon Road. And Rich, if you will read the legal notice and take the roll or whatever direction you want to go.
The Enfield Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing on Thursday, February 1st, 2018 at 7 p.m. in the Town Hall Council Chambers, 820 Enfield Street, Enfield, Connecticut, concerning the following application. Public hearing 2879, 91 Simon Road, 36 lot residential subdivision. Application and a special use permit for an open space subdivision for the Scantic Villages, LLC. Owner, Scantic Villages LLC owner applicant, map 69, lot, I've just got to make, 296, residential R44 zone, ART held, plans circulated to CROG, dated this 20th day of January 2018, Charles Duran, Chairman.
Okay.
Charles Duran.
Here.
Charles Ladd.
Here.
Nick Lefakis.
Here.
Mary Scott.
Here.
Virginia Higley.
Here.
Ken Nelson.
Here.
Linda DeGray.
Here.
Sarah Gruber.
Here.
And Rich Suzak is here.
Okay, if the applicants are here and the gentleman at the desk there would introduce themselves and make your presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Attorney Paul W. Smith. I represent Villages LLC. To my right is Steve Ashelman from Ashelman Engineering, and also John Martucci from Dutton Associates, also a civil engineer. Here also on behalf of Villages LLC. I do have, put this up on the easel, Mr. Chairman. This is sort of a overview of the site. If I can-
Roger, if you give him a
Just-
handheld mic.
It should be right there. Yeah, Attorney Smith, are these items that you've already submitted and they're in the record? If not, we would have to mark them as exhibits so that you refer to them by exhibits for the record.
Attorney Smith, so that we can see him, you sort of,
Scoot it.
yeah. Good, but no, not entirely, because then the camera can't pick them up.
Whatever works for you, Mr. Chairman. Only this first map was a colored one that we did. The remaining ones behind us are just a full set of plans submitted. So if you want to keep this one and mark
This is
it.
in the record, it's just colored up.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Just to give you a brief overview of this application, Commission members, this is a 60.5 acre site located on Simon Road in Enfield. It is actually on the border with the town of East Windsor. This is East Windsor here, so it's all the way in the south. There is a 3 acre portion of the site that is actually located within the town of East Windsor. That part is actually shown as part of Lot 8 and has not been included for purposes of the acreage or measuring open space or any of that, because it's located in the town of East Windsor. Basically, to describe the site, as I said, 60.5 acres. The plan is to develop by way of an open space subdivision, 36 lots. Initially, when some years back, when this plan was presented to the town, it was a 38 lot subdivision, but we have eliminated actually 2 lots at the front on Simon Road. And that area has been converted basically to open space.
Attorney,
Yes, sir.
I think if you move it this way, what's happening is you're on the community TV.
Okay.
And they're getting your back rather than the map that you're talking about.
So where would you like me to
Just slide it.
slide it towards?
Right.
Okay.
Well, either way.
Okay. Thank you. I'll try to keep that in mind.
Well, you're on TV. We just don't.
Yeah, I'm not TV savvy.
You make a better appearance from the front.
Right. Good to know. Good to know. So basically, the site, the only change from the prior time that we were before the commission is we've eliminated at the front of the site itself, we've eliminated 2 lots, and the area where those 2 lots are has been basically designated as open space. So we've added a little bit of open space. As you look at the site, on this side, again, on the south side, it's basically East Windsor. To the north of this site, I believe, is property owned by the town, as I remember, not looking at my notes. Basically, a couple of unique features to the site. One is there's an area of escarpments that's on the northern border of the site, and the Scannick River forms the boundary in the far east of the site. So what we've done basically is designed it so that we have 36 lots, a significant amount of open space that is where the river is, and up from the river. And if you look at how we've designed it, basically there's an entranceway in, which is basically a divided roadway or divided street, then a loop, and then finally at the end a short cul-de-sac. So it's from our perspective, it's a fairly compact site. And with regard to excuse my back if I'm on camera, if you look at how we've done it, basically we've devoted about a third of the site to open space. The remainder of the site obviously would be the lots and, the public roadway serving it. If you look at one of the criteria we have under 4.70.4, the real question there is, does this open space proposal satisfy the requirements under your zoning regulations? And again, for an open space subdivision, the requirement is 15 acres. Here we have over 60 acres. This is zoned R44, and an open space subdivision in an R44 basically allows you 1 acre per lot. Here we have 0.73 acres per lot, so we're 7.73 lots per acre, rather. So we're way under the 1 acre per lot requirement. We also, if you looked at the front of the plans, we have a density formula calculation that's required under the regulations. Under that calculation, we would be allowed a maximum of 49 lots. Here we are proposing 36, so we're way under the density calculation that you have in your regulations as a formula. We have also submitted as required a concept plan for a regular non-open space subdivision. The next part is really a statement that we've submitted to the commission. It's part of the record. You should have it in your packet, which is why we are proposing an open space subdivision versus a regular subdivision. And really the emphasis there is we've tried to preserve, again, if I show you on the map, one is the Scannick River area, and try to be sensitive to the escarpments, which are in this area. And you see the green border, that basically is the open space. So part of the reason for the 1/3 of the property as open space is it allows us to protect the sensitive area, which is the Scannick River, and it also allows us to keep any activity off the escarpment area, which again, the town and the Wetlands Commission, when we went and got their approval, regard as, again, a very sensitive area. And we would note that even under your plan of conservation, it suggests using the open space technique where you're near a river, the Scannick River. So it, when this was proposed and looked at by staff over the years, it was a proposal that was basically, we didn't see very negative comments from them in terms of the idea of using this as an open space. The regulation also requires that we give you some explanation as to how we envision the open space, if this is approved, how it's going to be used, how is that? And basically our vision is that all of the open space will be basically passive open space, meaning it's not going to be designed to be like a park. It's not going to be designed for use. It's going to be strictly passive, with the idea to sort of protect and preserve those sensitive areas so that there's really no kind of activity that's going to be allowed in those open space areas. There's not going to be, trails. There's not going to be picnic areas, anything like that. It's going to be strictly passive and left pristine. And the next question under your regs would be sort of how do you accomplish that? And the vision again that we had is to dedicate all of the open space to a nonprofit association owned by the homeowners, encumbered by the town with restrictive covenants in terms of usage.
Attorney Nate Smith,
Yes.
may I ask if you would consider, because I don't know who would be living in the houses and their knowledge of open space or
Right.
the forest and animals and so forth, if you would consider a land trust. I know there are several, we've done that before with certain
Yeah.
areas, and most of those people are
Right.
professionals, I guess.
Yeah, listen,
I just,
at the end of the day, Mr.
that's my
Chairman,
idea.
yeah.
I don't know about the rest of them,
Right.
whether, so that's,
That's one, we don't have a particular sort of fixed vision that we think works better than anything else. So if you said to us, we would prefer a land trust, then we would accommodate that and do it that way.
well, that would be up to the vote of the group.
Yes,
It's just something I'd
Right.
ask if you would consider.
Absolutely. I guess what I'm trying to stress is we would be guided by whatever the commission felt was appropriate and would certainly go along with that. I mean, we have no vision of any use of this property. And again, usually if you put it into a land trust, that's sort of what happens. It's designed to just be maintained as, again, passive, open space, not utilized for any particular recreational purpose or anything like
But I
that.
think they
Yeah.
more apt to have people that are knowledgeable in
I agree. And the one thing I would note, Mr. Chairman, is when we went through the wetlands process, one of the concerns was because you have houses, for example, along the escarpment area, how do you deal with that? You know, in terms of, you don't want people dumping stuff over, and the escarpment obviously is a steep, steep area. You don't want people dumping stuff into that area. So there is a requirement, if you've seen it in the wetlands approval, that we basically not only put it on the deeds to property and on the sales instruments, but that we also work with wetlands to sort of post signage along that area in people's backyards, basically saying, hey, don't dump over into the escarpment area. And again, they don't own it. It would be preserved as separate property. So again, it's a little sort of better protection than if they owned it and then felt, well, even if I'm restricted, it's still mine. I could kind of do with it what I want. So I'm certainly happy to do a land trust, Mr. Chairman, if that's the commission's thought on that. And I guess I could explore with staff. I assume if you've done it, there are some land trusts that accept this kind of property.
There are, and I discussed with
Right.
with Roger, and he had other suggestions too, which is something just that the commission may want to consider. But we have done other land trusts, yes.
Yeah, that would be absolutely excellent with us. So that sort of takes you through the why we thought an open space would work, and it really boils down to the fact that it allows us to designate almost 15 acres at the end of the property for the Scantic, which will be passive, and then it also allows us easier ways to preserve the escarpment. I would also note when talking about that open space that there is, again, I'm trying to be sensitive to your camera issue, there is here an area of open space that goes right to the roadway in terms of allowing access if someone wanted it from a land trust to walk the escarpments. Okay, it's not landlocked, sort of behind the road. And the same thing when you look at, there is an access way right to the road for the Scantic River sort of area that we're using as open space. So that the large components of open space have easy access from the road. You don't have to go through someone's backyard or anything like that.
Right, okay.
They actually abut the roadway in significant areas.
Attorney Smith, can you describe to me what those colors represent?
I'm sorry.
Please, just let me know.
This brown is the roadway system in. The green is basically delineates the open space. Then within it, what we did is, I think, Steve, correct me, but the brown here is slopes.
The escarpments, yes.
The escarpment slopes, so that you could see where they are in relation to the whole project.
The gray is the wetlands.
The gray would be
limits.
wetlands.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, they're gray.
and then the houses are the square blocks that you see in gray. We must have run out of colors. Or I think the printer stopped printing or something, so.
Had some issues.
We didn't get as many pretty colors as we would like. Now, with regard to the features of the subdivision itself, again, a couple of features that I would draw your attention to is the first 800 feet in, which is on the far end of the map, is the split roadway system in. Then you have the circular loop of the roadway, and then at the end, at the tail end, you have the cul-de-sac. And last time I was here and reviewed the minutes, obviously there was some discussion with regard to the split road entrance. Obviously, we proposed this for safety purposes in terms of giving a wide roadway, virtually 2 roadways in for purposes of safety. If there's an accident and one section was blocked, you could go in through the other. And one of the questions there is the islands, how should they be constituted? Because again, being a split roadway, there are, as you can see from your set of maps and on that map, there are 4 feet islands, I believe, right?
Yeah, I believe, yeah.
And with regard to those islands, we gave you 2 maps, one showing the islands like with brick pavers, and the other with low plantings. Our feeling is the low plantings would work better than the brick pavers. And then the issue there is, okay, now you have these islands and you have plantings on them. Who's going to be responsible to maintain that? And our thought there was, again, our vision is to do a homeowners association, make them responsible for the maintenance of those, and probably as we close on homes, pre-fund into an association so that there's funds in there for maintenance of those areas. I mean, they're not enormous areas, but you want them in the neighborhood, would want them reasonably maintained. Again, Mr. Chairman, we'd be open, obviously, to any suggestion that the commission had, but that seemed to be a sort of the most responsible way to attack it.
Oh, yeah.
I was curious.
Sure.
Thank you. I was curious if the association is going to do the snow plowing and the maintenance on the roads as well, or is that going to be towns eventually?
No, the roads themselves will be dedicated and accepted by the town as a standard subdivision. So we're not proposing a private subdivision. There'll be public roadways built to public
I was wondering
standards.
if that would create a conflict on maintaining the islands.
I don't think so, as long as there's a caveat within the approval that says, you know, we're responsible for that maintenance. There are, I mean, I've seen this in other towns where basically an association within the neighborhood does the island maintenance. It doesn't ever seem to have been a conflict. Now, ultimately, if the town wants to do something with it, it's town property and can. You know what I'm saying? In other words, ultimate control vests with the town. I mean, you're not going to surrender that. But there is
Put Roger out there with a hoe.
there is a responsibility to the association. But ultimately, you know, if the town said we want to do X or Y with them, they can do that, obviously.
Okay, just curious.
I have a quick question on the open
Sure.
space with
Yes.
regards to it. Because in our regulations, it tells us that a minimum of 33% of the area of the open space shall not be encumbered by wetlands, floodplains, and steep slopes
Right.
equal to or greater than 15%. So I'm trying to find what percentage of that open space.
If you
That.
look on the front sheet of the set of plans, we do all the calculations. And if you look down at the bottom, about in the middle of the page, to the right of this soil scientist signature, there's a signature block there's an open space. And it says open space, and it gives what's provided, and it also gives you the unencumbered open space.
It's right here.
But it doesn't hit the 33%. It only shows 29.7%, not the 33% that we require.
No, the 30, yeah, if you look at unencumbered open space would be 5.28 was required, and we're at the 6. If you look at it.
So I guess in essence too then, of this space that is open space,
Yep.
is any of that in a floodplain? Is any of that,
It can't be wetlands and be unencumbered, considered unencumbered.
I was
Can't be
also-
steeper than, I think,
15%?
15% can't be
Yes.
considered unencumbered. And the areas you kind of would have it if you looked at the plan would be in this area here, some of this area down here, which is not in the floodplain, and then the new area over here at the front.
I was also looking to find out where on the map was the 100-year floodplain zone.
I'm not sure where it's shown on these maps. I'll have the engineers look for it. That doesn't jump out at me, to be honest with you. I'm sure it may be on,
Maybe while they're looking for that, I
Yep.
could just ask for clarification again of the commissioner's question on the 33%, because
Right.
you've got unencumbered open space, and you say 33 times 16 acres is 5 point,
right.
or you got 16 times 33 is 5.28 acres. But then you say that you're providing 6 acres, but that's only 29.7.
that's what I'm
So
saying.
what does the 29.7 represent?
Represent.
I think there's a math error, and
Yeah, I think-
Go
I
ahead.
need a calculator.
They'll look at that and give you,
Yeah.
see if there's a.
Yeah, because, I'm looking at that saying, okay, I'm a little
Because I have
confused.
another question.
Yeah,
Wait a minute, please. Kenny was next. Yeah,
yes, I'm good, thank you.
My concerns with the open space is supposed to be good for the community. You've got this little piece here that nobody can access. It's basically landlocked. And then through the whole side of the subdivision, that's like small stream, storm drainage and stuff like that off the road. There is no benefit to the community by accepting that open space. And the town of Enfield has so many problems with escarpments right now throughout it that we can't afford to maintain. Why would we accept something like this? Now, back here, and I read the regulations pretty good today, back here, to go to the Scannick River, yes, we're trying to develop the Scannick River walkway or whatever. So we could do like a mix of open space and fee and lieu, but I would just have a problem. I mean, who benefits from this right here? This is just to try to come up with an open space number that meets the requirement. The town can never access that. People can't access it. This area here, that's not usable land for anybody. That's a problem down the road that we're gonna assume, and I just don't see any use for it. Make it part of their yards. Each homeowner's, responsible for their own area. Accept the back piece, work a deal with the developer, and they gave us access to it, which is beautiful. I'm not sure the neighbors are gonna like it with people parking there, but, I mean, you've got nice access back there. It's beautiful, but to accept all that open space, I just don't see the benefit in the community.
if there was some way possible, they don't show it, to also include the piece of East Windsor and have it a combined thing, but it's in East Windsor, and you can't count it with our development.
That triangle in East Windsor?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that,
I know.
no, it actually,
Wouldn't access.
No, you'd have to access it
Right.
down there where the old bridge used to be in East Windsor. They go in there with the dump rubbish tires.
I mean, we could create that as additional open space, I think. And if you do the concept of a land trust, obviously it could go in there.
Well,
could
that's
go into
why
the
I
land
was
trust.
saying a land trust,
Right.
I don't know if East Windsor would have to agree to it or what. but-
I don't think they would, as long as, because it's not, in other words, we're only encumbering it privately, we're giving it to a land trust. They
Okay,
could-
you're the attorney.
Yeah, I mean,
Does that piece abut the road there, Charlie? In East Windsor?
Yeah, you can drive right in. It's where the old, I think they call it the Melrose Bridge.
Right, but that does go all the way to the road.
Yeah, you could drive, I know
mean-
they've been having trouble with it.
I understand
I
your
think
point
it
about
was-
the escarpment area. I think one of the reasons that wetlands found it attractive to do it this way is because they didn't want the private homeowners to have ownership of the escarpment or much of the escarpment area. So when you say, is it a benefit to the community, it's not a benefit in the sense that you're going to use it for parks or recreational use. It's beneficial in that you either through a land trust or through the, the association where you encumber it, it then becomes basically passive open space that no one is going to sort of use, and in a sense it protects the escarpment. It then, by virtue of that, protects the town from sort of those long-term problems you get if someone's dumping down there, or someone's draining down there. And so that was the whole idea, to sort of take that out of sort of private hands, if you will, and not necessarily make it the town's problem as the first order of business for the town. You guys won't own it, right? It was to sort of preserve it in a way that it's not owned by the homeowner. It's posted. The idea is to post it. Excuse me, I guess I got to be sensitive to the camera. But the post basically signs here so that the homeowners don't, dump their
They didn't correct you.
embankments. But take it basically out of their hands. So the idea wasn't sort of to, just dump this off. But the idea was, it's, at least from, I think, from the wetlands perspective, when we went through, it's a very sensitive area. We don't want people messing with it. We don't want people really to own it if we can. Either it's going to be owned by the town, or it's going to be owned in some way that, it just creates more difficulty when you have those areas, if they're sensitive, if they are owned by somebody, because then there's a sense that, hey, I own it, right? I can't do stuff with it, but I own it, right?
But you just said in the deeds, you're going to put a restriction on all those deeds.
Well,
And that makes enforcement action against the homeowner a
Right.
lot easier
Yeah.
than if a land trust owns it, where's the land trust? Who's monitoring this? And how do you enforce when I don't own that land? I don't know who put it there. If they own the land, they're responsible for it.
Right.
And you as an attorney know you can enforce that deed. They sign the deed. If they don't like it, don't buy the house.
I mean, I haven't seen many of those kind of enforcement actions because the town really hates to sort of get into that. Again, the idea either with a land trust or an association is, especially I think with a land trust, if there are people that, know what, they'll walk it periodically, and therefore, they're much more geared to sort of.
One thing I should add is in terms of the land trust, doesn't want to do any kind of maintenance on anything. So basically, when I read the Haley and Aldridge report and Dr. Clarence Welty's report, they have a statement here that the gullies will degrade more rapidly than other slopes. The rate of degradation is not estimated in the report. And Clarence Welty does mention it in his report that these local areas can be mitigated with riprap and other erosion controls. If these controls are to be considered, it would make sense to construct them now instead of in the future. And I think that, what will happen is that those gullies will degrade, they will erode, and eventually, you know, there's going to be a big mess there, and somebody's going to have to maintain that. So, you know, if somebody's going to take that over, realistically, they should be stabilized now as much as possible, rather than allow them to further degrade, and then all of a sudden, once the degradation becomes so great that we can't control it anymore, and some remedial work would have to be done, whoever owns that land or is responsible for that land is going to have to come in and rectify it. So it's one of those kind of deals where if the town owns it or a land trust owns it, they're going to recognize the limitations that they have, and they're going to say, wait, I don't want to take that responsibility because ultimately I'm going to have to fix it when it breaks.
That's true.
So, you know, I think that, you know, I think that we should consider, why don't we start, you know, protecting those gullies? Because you can sort of see how the erosion is really controlled wherever the water flows. And wherever the water flows, they're going to continue to erode. And it's not going to stop. And I think that you even have it in one of your maps where it shows that the fact that you're actually losing material as much as, you know, 3 or 4 inches over the past 9 years from when it was, you know, surveyed in 2008, and then when it was surveyed in 2017, there's 3 or 4 inches of material that you already lost. So, you know, I'm thinking that, you know, this is not a good deal for anybody.
I would say with regard to your point that my understanding, and again, maybe the engineers can speak to it more fully, but when we did the survey in 09 or 08, we did a survey in 17, we found very little, if any, change.
Yeah.
You have to speak into the microphone.
We went out there late last year.
Just identify yourself.
Yeah,
Oh, Steve Ashelman. And the ground shots that we took at the tops and bottoms of the escarpments were very similar to what was originally portrayed on the plans.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily talking about the bottom and tops of the escarpments. It's the intermediate locations along the escarpments that are eroding. So basically what happens is that you're going to lose material, you know, along that plane. So, you know, as that water's flowing, it's carrying materials away with it. So ultimately things start falling apart and start degrading.
For the record, my name is John Martucci. I'm the licensed civil engineer that designed the drainage and was present at the meetings years ago. Part of the design, all the houses that abut the escarpments, their roof leaders are connected to the roadway drainage, which goes to the detention water quality basins. So we actually direct that water from the roofs and the front yards were graded so that everything drained towards the road, so that it wouldn't go down the escarpment. So we're reducing the runoff that today gets to the escarpments. That was part of the design. And Dr. Welty and was Haley and Aldrich, they addressed the long-term erosion in detail, and that's why the open space was designed to I think it was 60 feet from the top of the escarpments. That we pulled all the houses away from that. So we're reducing the drainage to the escarpments. It just makes it there, and therefore we're extending the life of the escarpments.
I like.
Wait a minute, I don't know if they're finished.
Oh, sorry.
I guess the only thing I would add is that any kind of water flow is going to eventually erode it. It's just a matter of time. And the thing is, you know, looking at, you know, the amount of material that I see lost in this comparison, that, you know, where you have, you know, again, an elevation that's directly on top of another elevation versus, you know, 10 or 15 feet away where it doesn't really matter, that I can show you 3 or 4 or 5, you know, locations where, you know, that has already occurred. So, you know, I'm not making it up. I'm sort of using your data that you've presented to us. And, you know, and I think that, you know, it would be prudent that, you know, if long-term stabilization of those gullies are going to be maintained, that they may be maintained now rather than put it off later because somebody else is going to have to pay for it later, and that somebody else is normally the town because nobody else is going to step forward.
We'll certainly take a look at that issue, but frankly, again, my concern is this. In '09, we went through an extensive ERT on this. We hired Dr. Welty to look at this. The town, I think, hired their own.
I believe there were three, I believe, right, Roger?
And then we had an LLP, and they all came to the conclusion, and believe me, the only concern that Wetlands has were two things. One is the Scantic River, and the second was the escarpments, because as you can see at the bottom of, again, I know them, at the bottom of the escarpments is obviously are wetland areas, so any erosion goes into the wetlands. And most of the escarpment is in what you would call the upland review area. That's the area beyond the wetlands that's under the control of the Wetlands Commission. So we literally spent 6 months working on this problem until, as far as I could tell from the ERT, from the LEP, from the soil science.
But I just read you the paragraph from the soil scientists that said that if you're going to do it, you better do it now, and that's what they're saying in terms of, you know, everybody's ignoring the fact that that's what their recommendations are.
Well, but that, yeah, I think
you know, and in terms of unless they write us another letter and say, oh, we made a mistake and we don't think you need to do that, I think they're already on record saying that. And anybody else who's looking at it has to be a qualified geotechnical engineer. And these are two qualified geotechnical engineers that have said that. So anybody else, I don't know who to trust. You know, I would trust these two guys because they have the credentials. Anybody else wouldn't have those credentials.
No, listen, those are one of those, Dr. Welty, who's probably, he's in his 90s now, but he's the most renowned geotechnical guy in the state. We hired him, and what I'm saying to you is what I'm a little puzzled at is you're saying there needs to be something more done on this plan than the plan that they all signed off on and approved and said, yeah, this will work. And I mean, you seem to be suggesting.
But who signed off and said it would work? In terms of, I read the report, and the reports say that if you're going to if you're going to have, you're going to eventually have a problem with these gullies. And if you want to control the erosion that's going to happen in these gullies, you have to control it now. And basically, both of them have said that. In terms of, I can show you them. They didn't say that you didn't have to do it. They just said that it would just be, you know, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it now. And if somebody's going to have to maintain it, and that somebody doesn't want to go into their own pocketbook to maintain that, it should be done now.
I'm not, listen, we're not sort of trying to pass off the issue, because what happened was, based on their reports, the design that we initially came up with was modified, and I think what they were really talking to there is that your drainage, any drainage should be at the bottom of any of the slopes and should be adequately sort of rip-wrapped or done in a way that you're not going to cause any increased.
No, that's not what it says. That's not what it says. I'm just reading verbatim what it says. In terms of, you're trying to interpret what they're saying and interpret it to mean the bottom of the gullies, and they're not saying the bottom of the gullies. They're saying the gullies.
The Dr. Welty's original recommendation or analysis was that from the bottom of the gullies, they would naturally erode. If this was never built, if they would naturally erode to end up to a 3-to-1 slope, and that's the way they would. Whether or not this is ever built, they erode naturally, he said, but they would fall back to a 3-to-1 slope. And we went from that 3-to-1 slope, where it came into the existing grade, then the houses were set back 60 feet, again, as part of his recommendation. It's in his report.
It's 3-to-1 and 20 feet. So basically what you're really saying is that whoever has a backyard is no longer going to have a backyard greater than 20 feet when the erosion occurs. And most people aren't going to be satisfied with a backyard of only 20 feet after the erosion occurs. But that's what you're really saying.
I believe the period of time we were talking about was 100 years or something.
Well, eventually, are these houses going to disappear after 25 years, after 50 years? You know, eventually they're going to be there for 100 years, I would imagine. So that, you know, ultimately that's what we're talking about, is that these people are going to only have a backyard of 20 feet when this all happens. And then what are these people going to do? They're going to come to the town and say, hey, you know, we're losing our backyard. We want you to help us fix it because I want to see a 50-yard backyard or a 60-yard backyard, not a 20-yard backyard. Because that's already happened to other locations where the town has had to go in and fix them because something has happened. And everybody blames the town because the town allowed them to build their houses there, and then ultimately it's the town's responsibility. And this has happened more than once.
The places, we went through all the places in town that are, and there are places where back in the 60s and 70s, they had drainage outlets at the top of the escarpments. And then you have a point discharge on these highly erodible soil, and that's where the town was having a lot of problems. There's no drainage outlet at the top of these escarpments. All drainage was directed away from these escarpments, and actually the building of the subdivision reduces the runoff to the escarpments, and therefore prolongs or slows the erosion
So what you're
process.
telling me is that you're extending your work to the top of the slope and then regrading everything away from the top of the slope towards the road.
Including backyards.
Including backyards. So basically everything from the top of the slope out to the street is pitched away from the top of the slope.
No.
Well, that's what you're saying, but
No,
because
I know what I'm saying. That's
okay.
not what I'm saying.
All right.
What I'm saying is the front yards and the roofs all drain to the road. Okay, so you have what today that pitches towards the escarpments. So we're cutting off and have zero runoff going to the escarpments for the footprint of the house and the front yards. So you're reducing the runoff that naturally goes to the escarpments.
But that doesn't eliminate everything. You still have all the other land that's behind there, and that's what I'm saying is that, you know, we're talking apples and oranges in terms of, you know, we really need to sort of address, you know, again, if we're going to accept this as open space and there's going to be future maintenance required, who's going to maintain that? And if we can eliminate that future maintenance that's required, it'd be easier to accept that as open space. But you know, but ultimately, a land trust is not going to take it because they don't want to maintain anything, because ultimately they're responsible if it's in their possession.
That may be too, right.
I'm not sure I agree with the conclusion, but again, I guess one way to solve that would be, again, if there's a homeowners association that then owns that, they would ultimately be responsible. But again, recalling going through the wetlands process, which again, the really only issue was this escarpment erosion issue, it seemed to me that both experts and the LEP came to the conclusion that this works. I mean, they approved the design. Wetlands approved the design, issued a permit for us because they believe that this works. Now, they didn't believe that over a period of time there was going to be some sort of significant erosion of the slopes that would then
Not
cause
saying significant.
problems for the homeowners. It just, that wasn't the conclusion that anybody reached, including our, I don't want to say soil scientists, geotechnical scientists, the town's geotechnical. I mean, that's the conclusion they reached. Now, you can.
But that's not what they say in the report.
I don't
You
agree
keep
with
saying
that.
you keep saying they reached another conclusion, but that in the report they specifically addressed that as being a possibility, and this is the way you solve it. Otherwise, they would have never even addressed it if it was not a possibility, or if it was a non-existent condition.
All right, now,
Okay, that's
we
it.
got nowhere on that.
Mr. Chairman,
I guess.
It's
Can
been
I-
stated,
can I-
it's in the record.
can I make a suggestion here? I think what we've kind of gotten off, and we jumped right into some issues, and it might help, and it's only my suggestion, and the commission can do what they want, but perhaps it would be helpful if we actually had the engineer present whole drainage concept on the subdivision to begin with. I mean, what's there now, and how is their drainage gonna work, and how is the two detention bases work, and where the water flows now and where it's gonna flow. And the commission can ask as they go along the particular things. I mean, we know we're gonna have to come back because the drainage calculations that were submitted are not consistent with this plan, but I think it's hard to sort of jump into, well, where's the water going, what's happening in the escarpment, without getting a sense of, all right, what's there now, what's going to happen if we do nothing, and then say, okay, well, here's what it's designed to do, and at the end of the day, you still get to evaluate it as to whether, A, you agree that that's what it's going to do, or B, that that's desirable.
Ginny.
I just, two things. I understand now what Rich is saying because I found the sections in the paragraphs. But what I wanted to say originally was I totally agree with Ken. In the past, for subdivisions with escarpment soils, not only do they record it on each deed, they also put up some kind of a fencing mechanism with medallions, because when 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road, when somebody wants to put an addition on and the building department goes out and looks, they won't necessarily know how far the escarpment needs to be. So I think that's a very valid point, Ken. Thank you for raising it.
Well, there were also, as you recall, on outbuildings and swimming pools and all that on the deeds.
Yeah, that creates a problem, but.
Kenny?
Along with, I mean, I agree with Rich. I'm not a soil scientist. I mean, he's well more knowledge on this than I am. But water erodes soil. Tabor Road, 50 years ago when it was built, had a little gully in the backyard. Now it's 20 feet deep, it's down to the clay bed, and it's getting wider. And the people's backyards are 10 to 15 feet, and they are irate. It cut their yards right in half. So it may not be a problem today. Even if you do riprap and everything, it's still going to be a problem 100 years from now. And if somebody dumps something in it, it's going to be a problem the minute that happens. That's why I'm saying, as open space, it's worthless. We're accepting a problem. Maybe not today, but we are accepting a problem. And the town has enough of them. I'm okay with it. They've done extensive stuff to try to eliminate the problem, but I don't want to assume a problem either. I mean, I'm okay with the way it is, as long as we don't assume the land or a land trust that's not going to maintain it. They're putting it in the deeds of the home. That's fine. It's the homeowner's responsibility, and the town has more enforcement action if somebody does dump stuff back there. So, I mean, I'm good with it the way it is, but not the open space. As far as this subdivision in the back towards the Scannick River, I mean, that is beneficial to the community. There's a use for it for everybody, including the residents. So negotiate with them there, work out an agreement, but to take a piece of landlocked land nobody can get to and to take a problem down the road, I just don't see it. And I mean, I understand where you're going, Rich, but this is going to go back and forth, and if it's not our problem, then it's on the homeowners and it's in their deed. They should read their deeds when they buy the home and make a decision on whether they want to accept this responsibility or not.
I guess I sort of two comments on the escarpment issue. It seems like I agree with Rich that there's sort of ships passing in the night about what we're talking about. There's obviously several sources of erosion. One of them is coming from where the houses would be built, and to that point, there are measures being taken like grading the roof so that it runs into the storm drains. But there's also the river below and the erosion from down there. So obviously we can't stop all erosion, but I think the main issue is this a suitable place to have houses built, knowing that erosion will happen, and particularly will happen quicker in this area, and is this a good place to build houses, knowing that we've had people's yards disappear? And is the real question, how much farther out should this go? I guess, I'm sorry, the second point I had was with respect to the wetlands approval. Wetlands, I think their mission is very different from ours. Their mission is protecting the wetlands and making sure that there's no issues there, but ours is, again, is this a suitable place for a house to be built or for the subdivision to occur? And where things should go to comport with the health, safety, and welfare of the community, not just today, but not very long from now. So I'm just curious why this isn't always going to be an issue, and if the answer to that is, well, it is. Maybe this isn't. Maybe the house has come back more. I don't know the solution. I understand that you've put a lot of work into this. I just don't know. I don't know if this is susceptible to an easy answer.
Well, the one thing I would say is, and we can sort of regurgitate this a bunch, but I think what we need to do is at least get to the commission. You've got Dr. Welty's report. I think you have your ERT report. I think there was an ERT in this, an environmental review. You have the other reports from, I mean, I'll get you more information because there was certainly a lot presented about this issue. I mean, because what wetlands was concerned about is really the same thing, which was the erosion from the escarpments goes into the wetlands. But beyond that, they're sort of the ones that see the erosion issue when it comes to a house, because somebody says, hey, I want to come in, I need to fill in this ravine that, you know, is created. So they sort of see it firsthand because they need to issue the permit, you know, to sort of fill in those kind of areas. So I think, again, they were pretty sensitive to it, but
I haven't heard a presentation tonight, though, of the drainage plan, and that's what I'm saying is, shouldn't you at least put on a presentation right now as to what your drainage plan is so the commission knows?
I mean, I think John could maybe give us a brief overview. It's a fairly...
But I mean, a brief overview is not going to cut it on an issue that's sufficient like that. I mean, we really want to start with how much water you're starting with, where's it going, what are you doing with it, and how does your drainage plan... how is it designed to address the issues that you've heard so far?
Yeah, I think John's preference would be maybe to come back at the next meeting and sort of give you that as a synopsis with the other stuff.
Well, the only problem with that is that without a presentation of what you're actually presenting, we're left with snippets and bits and pieces of what it is you're trying to do. So I think that in order to move you along, you got to present a presentation to the commission that the commission can then ask you questions about, so that you get all their questions answered, because otherwise you're going to come back and present the next time around, and then there are still going to be questions. But, I mean, you have a drainage plan there, you have your engineer here, and it's right here in front of them, and they've all read it, and it would be just helpful if you made a presentation on it.
Roger, can I just ask you a quick question real fast? When was the wetlands approval for this subdivision? Because I'm looking at the only approval I see was there a recent approval, or was this clear back from 2009?
No, the approval was in April of 2000, April 14th, 2009. I gave you a copy of what that approval was. I brought a copy of the maps. When something's on appeal, the 5 years doesn't run while it's on appeal. So it was on appeal in the court system from 2009 to 2012, or 2014-15. In addition, there was a statute passed during that time that extended the life of approvals, so there was no longer 5-year condition. So basically, from a time standpoint, that approval is still in effect. The second question is there been any substantial change from what is before you tonight in 2018 from the 2009 approval? The only changes that staff is aware of at this point in time that are significant are the reduction of 2 lots. The reduction of 2 lots is not an issue that would necessarily trigger a going back to wetlands, because you're actually reducing the amount of impact on wetlands. Now, one of the other reasons why it's important that we have a presentation of drainage and how the drainage works is so that we can determine if there are any other issues that we may not be aware of. And so, I mean, it is really important that we know what the proposed drainage is.
Yep.
And there is an overlapping jurisdiction, and just because wetlands approved it doesn't mean that
Yeah.
you have to you also have the same responsibilities. You have responsibilities for drainage on all parts of
I
the
think
site,
that's,
not just
to the
those that
applicant's
impact
advantage.
wetlands.
Yes,
I think
absolutely.
that's to the applicant's advantage.
Thank you,
to do
Roger,
so.
for explaining that.
So it
What?
really
Yep.
is important, and it's your choice, but I mean, it's 8 o'clock and you're the only item on the agenda.
Okay,
That's why I recommended to you that it would be the only one on the agenda.
see if I can get over here.
It would be best so that Kenny can see that if you do stand between the map and Roger on the other side. Pull the map towards you, Ken, to the first chair here. No, not that way. This way.
Where
Come
are you,
this
Charlie?
way.
I can see.
No, yeah, but he's blocking everything. Stand over on the other side.
Okay.
These guys are the ones that are going to vote, and if you don't see him, well, he's facing it now towards us. Okay.
Without, today, there's a high point, and it runs along here. Runs along here, and this drains towards the escarpment, and best drains out this way.
Don't you have a drainage map?
Yeah,
If you flip them.
them, John.
I have a drainage map, but they're in such a big scale, I'd have to take them all over the wall. This is
Whatever's
actually-
important to you.
This is actually easier because it's an overview
All
of
right,
the whole thing.
that's your
Drainage-
choice.
Drainage goes by, multiple acres, so you can't see it from a small map. Even my drainage area map.
What the commission is used to having you do is to take a section of the map and go through it and where the water
Section by
flows
section,
and
if
where
you
it's
have
going to row, and show where the drainage basins are and how big they are and how they're sized and everything else.
Where's this guy from?
Sheet 8.
Over here, it's not the way that where he's saying. I'm looking at just looking at this, everything's sort of draining. This whole thing is draining into here. Because that's why it's eroding here. This whole thing is draining. So the peak is actually over here. It's way past the road. It's closer, way closer to the, to this line than it is to, because here's the peak right here, where this road is. That's the front.
Okay.
Here's another one.
Do you need it? Do you need clips?
We're on sheet 8.
Native 21.
Yeah, well, I actually kind of wanted to put that.
And Rich, this is Michael. This is sheep.
Okay, everybody there? This is the entrance drive, and it's the beginning part, and the escarpments are over here on along the north edge. And so today, runoff drains pretty much this way to the north, and then to the south. So, but this runoff from this piece of property doesn't affect the escarpments. What the proposed drainage is doing is picking up the runoff from the buildings and the front yards, just because we're kind of making a high point. So the front yards drain to the road and the buildings, and they go into a drainage system in the road, which carries it to this detention basin. And the detention basin has an outfall that drains out to the bottom of the escarpments where it's stable, okay? Because those soils have eroded. And so we have a drainage system that carries it down to the bottom, not to the top. The places in town during the wetlands application and when we addressed the escarpments, all the places in town that were having problems where you said there was a swale, there was just a light depression, that was still running down to the escarpments. It was directing drainage from upland down into the escarpments. The entire drainage of all the houses that are bordering the escarpments was to drain away from the escarpments into the drainage system, where we either go to this basin or the other basin that's in the open space on the other end of the subdivision.
Question for you. In terms of when you have this concentrated, flow of water over, highly susceptible soils that are already eroded because they're at the bottom of the gully, so they're not cemented at all. So basically, they can easily flow as you increase, the volume of water that you're adding, from a detention basin like that. So obviously it has to do with the volume of water and the velocity of the water as to how much erosion you're going to get. But ultimately, you would expect that if you have something that's sheet flowing and it's flowing more uniform into all these little areas versus if you start adding a concentrated flow, it's like a garden hose. And if you leave a garden hose going, on any, land that has any kind of slope, eventually even that garden hose starts eroding everything. And basically, that's what I envisioned. The bottom of these, at the bottom of the escarpment is very loose, silty soil that's very light, and it's going to get, pushed away as this water's flowing. Keep that in mind because it goes somewhere.
Are you talking about the outlet of the drainage systems?
Yes.
Well, they're heavily armored, and
but they're only armored for 10 feet in terms of your exit pools are only 10 feet wide. So after 10 feet, they're not necessarily, and it all depends on head. In terms of if you had a 2-foot head, obviously you don't have that much water pressure. But as you get to 10 feet of head and 15 feet ahead, 35 feet ahead, 45 feet ahead, all of a sudden, then you got this 24-inch diameter pipe sticking out of the ground, and you're pushing 24-inch diameter water through a pipe, and all of a sudden it's only armored for 10 feet. What happens after that 10 feet? It's not like it stopped flowing.
it was my understanding that the erosion from the escarpments isn't starting from the bottom.
But that's where your outlet is now, right? At the bottom of
Yes,
the erosion.
yes.
Right. But eventually, as
the
you-
bottom is down past the erodible soils. The bottom is stable.
But it will continue to erode. It's just like the Grand Canyon. It started out as a little gully and it ended up as a big gully.
This is not the Colorado River. And these detention basins, after the storm stops, they drain within an hour of of when the storm stops. So it's not a continuous flow. This isn't, and they're designed with heavy armament and a plunge pool that actually slows the velocity to sub-erosive velocities and spreads it out so you don't. Everything was designed to eliminate that. And, you know, again, we went through this, and it was 9 years ago. I was just trying to remember exactly all the things that we did. So,
yeah, well, he had made a comment that all the water from those houses is going to drain away from the escarpment. So you're going to pitch the backyards towards the house?
no. These lots continue to drain where they did, but it's the escarpments.
Right, I understand the escarpment's over there. So
Yeah, the escarpments are over here. This is just a field, and this is fairly flat in here.
well, there's a house next door. How is the house going to be impacted?
Which house?
The one right on Simon Road. If that water's going to drain that way, aren't
Well,
you going to impact?
it drains that way today. From the roofs, you know, the impervious areas from the roofs and the driveways and the front yards are going to be directed to the road and to the drainage system. So, I mean, today, when you do a drainage analysis of a development or of a road or whatever, you let the water go pretty much where it's going. You never direct it like to another drainage
And along
area.
with what Roger said, not having a before and after map, and I apologize, I don't have this map, the subdivision map, but the farmhouse that's sitting on the property currently that borders the current house, the old house that's getting torn down, is sitting up on a huge hill. There's no way the water is running to the neighbor's property with that hill there. Right here is the old farmhouse, right? That's on the property.
Yeah, I think this is
Drive
it.
down Simon Road. That
This
house
is
is
it.
10 feet up in the air.
And see this contour here?
Yeah.
That house that's the top of the hill.
The farmhouse
So,
is almost on the
there's
property.
right here.
Yeah.
And we got, actually, we moved, we have the 132 contour here. So we moved the house, and this drains down this way.
So it drains towards the house.
We have whenever you drain it, we have these drainage arrows that shows that we're draining around the house.
Right.
Right. So you come away from the foundation, according to the building code, whatever it is, the first 15 feet has to drain away from the house, and then it's going to drain around this way to the house. You know, every lot is drained a little bit different, but for in general, the roof is tied in directly. The gutters are tied into the street
Right,
drainage.
I understand that. You
and
said
and
that
this
the
is
front yards, the drains,
Right.
all that, the roof goes to the road. But you made a
but
comment that
in
none
this
of the
area,
yards.
this house, yeah, this house drains a little bit different just because there's a hill there.
Mhm.
But we have the proposed grading in the existing grading. So, you know, every one of these lots we went through and graded. But the big premise was house and front yards, get them in the road and get them in the storm drain. The backyards,
You're talking about the leaders, are you talking about the leaders on the back of the house, or all of them,
all the roof leaders,
all the roof leaders?
yes.
Because
Roof
you keep
leaders.
mentioning only the front of the house, and it's
the
rather
roof leaders
confusing.
and the front yard, and the front yard area. was
So
graded
the entire,
towards
all the
road.
leaders are going to the street.
Yes.
So there'll be no water off the roof onto the back property.
Anything that we were,
That's a lot of piping. I have another thing later, because if they plug up, I'm wondering what the homeowner's
that
gonna
was a
do.
rule for the houses that border the escarpments. This area, here we go. This is part of the loop road. This is where We
Well,
got
that's
the-
really what the major concern is on the drainage, and you're talking up the other end of the building.
Right. We got stuck on this part is just drained like any other subdivision, except we did direct everything to the road so that we could maintain where it outfalls, so we could control that. So the issue was the escarpments. So this part really doesn't affect the escarpments. All this drains naturally in this direction towards East Windsor, and but this high side of the road we picked up into the storm drain system. This is the fork for the loop road, and the escarpments start right over here, or where they're adjacent to the subdivision.
Just as a question, do all the roads and all the roof leaders drain into the detention basins, or do they drain into the town storm area? Because you're making a big point that nothing's flowing towards the escarpment, but as they go into the detention basins, they still get thrown into, the escarpments or at the end of your plunge pools and everything else. So basically that water still has to go somewhere. It's not like it evaporates when it goes towards the road. And if it goes into the catch basin and it goes into your detention basins, ultimately it goes into, the gullies and the escarpments and everything else.
Ultimately, it ends up in the detention basin, which directs the drainage down to the bottom of the escarpments into the wetlands, but not.
He's talking about outlets down into the.
Those soils at the bottom are no longer eroding. They're stable. Dr. Welty's report and Haley and Aldrich confirmed that the problem with the escarpments is that the surface of the escarpment itself, that slope is continuously eroding. That's what's eroding, and it's ending up and it goes down to the bottom, and then it goes out to the Scantic River. And again, every place in town that's had serious problems with erosion is that they had a point discharge at the top of the escarpment. And so then it cuts a gully, and then the gully continues to erode because you have this drainage discharge at the top of the escarpment.
Again, just looking at his report, in terms of, he never says that's ledge or anything. He just says that's a varved clay and a clay sill. So basically, it's still, again, a material that can be eroded. It's not like you're saying it's stable, but it's a varved clay. It's in terms of, a varved clay is not a ledge material that will never get eroded. It's still soil material. But again, we didn't get any boring, so I don't know exactly how dense it is. But typically a clay is erodible in terms of if you have water passing through over it. So in that sense, it's still erodible, it's stable, but it won't erode as fast as a sandy, silty material, but it's still erodible.
I understand that, but that's not what's happening at these escarpments. That's not the issue. I mean, we could go on and on about. Let me
do we have somebody that knows about escarpments and this particular soil that we could have in here for?
I'm a civil engineer. This is all I do is drainage and site plans, and I understand you're an engineer also, but the Clarence Welty reviewed these plans, and Haley and Aldrich reviewed these plans. Yes, they wrote extensive reports, but we addressed the issues of the escarpments eroding by, and again, we're not directing. We're not. What we did was here we go. This is sheet 9. This is the next sheet. this is the lower part of the
Well, that's where they should be.
circular road. Okay, so this all drains towards East Windsor, again,
Good, throw it on
From-
this one.
from the houses. The houses are along the high point, that's why there's a contour around them.
Go to sheet 10.
So
What's on there?
There's a note that says that they-
from here, it drains this way, and then the houses drain to the road, and these houses drain to the road, but these don't go
Where's this?
to the escarpment. Here are the escarpments. This is the cul-de-sac end. I think we're missing a sheet here, sheet 11. Yeah, sheet 10. Yeah, give me sheet 11. Okay. Sheet 11, this is sheet 11. The first sheet was here. This is the fork in the road. And so this is sheet 11, and as you can see with these contours, these are the escarpments. So, existing conditions.
But that's only one piece of the lot, though.
This is 100 feet. So existing conditions, we have about 200 feet of land that runs to the escarpments now, that just surface runoff, drains to the escarpments, that in the proposed condition will not drain surface runoff going to these gullies. We're cutting that off and draining that to the drainage system in the road and carrying that to the detention basin. So that'll end up coming to this discharge point at the very bottom of the escarpment, where this channel is wide and flat, and we have it coming to a plunge pool where we stop the velocity. But that's not what causes these gullies, is not the runoff that's in this channel down here. What causes these gullies is runoff massing itself from the high point, the existing high point, coming and then it finds a swale, a low point, and it goes from being a sheet flow to a concentrated flow, and then it runs down these escarpments. So we're reducing quite a bit the runoff that goes to these gullies that are here by picking up the houses and bringing it into the road, bringing it to our detention basin, where we hold it, let it out slow, and release it at the bottom. Yes.
I don't have this, I apologize, I never got one. So is there any sort of remediation?
No, he's not doing anything down here.
Nothing, no damming or riprap dam to slow?
What was that?
Well, I guess the question is that, as you're releasing the water into the bottom of the gully, is that, the water is not, other than the fact that you have a 10-foot plunge pool, there is no other remedial work that's being done at the bottom of these gullies. In terms of, because all of a sudden you are going to have, again, some concentrated flow there, and that the gullies are unprotected, that, anything that would be erodible at these bottom of these gullies during the periods of peak flow, there's always the possibility that sediment or that material, the varve, silt and varve clay will get eroded during the peak flows.
This is a channel that has a very large drainage area. But the channel here has no effect on this gully that's
These are new maps, so
That-
this should have been redone.
Again, these gullies are not formed
I know, I'm just looking at the
by
deeds because it.
this
it
channel
doesn't
at the
seem
bottom. They're
One
formed
from the other,
by
and I'm just
stormwater that's running off here, and then
Didn't know these drawings.
gets to a concentrated flow and runs
Most of
down
the guys
those
just
slopes.
come in
And we're reducing that, we're eliminating that. It's not the Grand Canyon.
Right,
It's
but
not
I
running
guess
from the
what I'm really saying is that, you know, if you do have some additional erosion at the bottom of these gullies due to the fact that you're adding a significantly, you know, larger concentrated, you know,
Roger,
water from.
excuse me, because we're still going on. Is there any way we could get a soil scientist or somebody that knows escarpments and looking at these plans, whether or not they'll do what we want to have done? Because it seems we're still going around in circles.
I understand that, and I have no problem providing additional information to the commission on this. The one thing I would
Well,
say,
let me just answer the question, Counselor. The regulations do provide that if you believe that you need a soil scientist, that you could choose a soil scientist, and the applicant would pay the bill,
Because
so that you
we're
would,
going
the
back
commission
and forth,
would have their
really,
own soil
I don't think we have
scientist.
an answer, unless Richard doesn't seem satisfied. with Ken.
But with respect to the soil scientist, the wetlands agent at the time this went through wetlands was a soil scientist. There were several soil scientists involved in here, and there are reports in the wetlands files with respect to that. But if the commission believes that you would like your own independent soil scientist, you know, we could, the town could hire a soil scientist to review these plans at the expense of the applicant. That is provided for in your regulations.
That's up to the commission
I
and
also-
and the people that are asking the questions. If they don't seem satisfied,
I have a clarification on one of the notes that you guys put on your,
I'd like to
plans.
finish this point if
Yeah,
we
go
could,
ahead.
though, if I may, Mr. Chairman. I don't mean to interrupt.
because there are other items.
It's,
I
re-
think
it's related to what we're talking about, soil scientist stuff too, but
But I was going to say, fundamentally, what happens in this process is we don't bring these plans to you first. They go through the town engineer. He looks at all of this stuff. He looks at the erosion. He looks at the drainage. He looks at the size of the basin. I mean, all of that stuff has been looked at by the town's experts.
Well, you may have
We've never
satisfied
received- we haven't
him, but
received
you've
the
got
town
7
engineer
people
report.
here
No,
to satisfy.
I understand that, but I'm just, I mean, there's a feeling like, well, we haven't, you know, nobody has looked at this but us, and we're presenting it to you, and that's, you know, sort of as a first look, and it's not. I mean, there's, your experts have looked at it,
understand
and
that.
again, if the commission thinks there's need for further expertise, I think I'm okay with that. I just wanted to make the point that we
Well,
don't bring this data to you sort of raw. It's pushed through the review by your own civil engineers who look at it, who look at things like, you know, what is how are the drainage, how's it operating? Is there going to be erosion? Is there going to be a problem in the future? Does it work at the bottom of the slopes properly?
We
It's not-
understand that,
Yeah,
and
okay.
and
I
you
just wanna make
satisfied
that
them,
point.
but these 7
Yes.
people are the ones that have to be
Absolutely.
satisfied.
So my question, Charlie, is we've already had 3 soil scientists or some. I think it's in how it's being interpreted. I mean, and I've always had a problem with this. The developer hires their own soil scientists. If the town disagrees with it, they hire a soil scientist and make the developer pay for it. Well, the developer's already paid for it. Why doesn't the town just hire it right off the bat so the developer doesn't have to pay twice? There's 3 people who have made comments on this. The most I think we could ask for is clarification from them. Do they say it's stabilized or don't they? Rich seems to think they're saying it's not stabilized. It needs work now, which I understand what he's saying. But to hire a 4th person to get involved in this,
Well, that's
I just
all I want
don't.
to know. What is it we need?
And that's why I said The drainage, that's up to the homeowners when they buy it. We know there's a problem there. We're making them put it in the deed. That's why I don't want to accept it as open space, because it becomes our problem. If we don't accept the open space, it's up to the developer and the homeowner how they remediate this problem 20 years, 50 years, or 100 years down the road. But it doesn't fall back on us. And that's why to me, it's as simple as don't accept the land.
Well, what, all right, that's that part, but what is it, in other words, I don't know if the commission is satisfied.
I've got
But
some
I-
concerns
I
with.
think
No,
you're
that's-
suggesting like somebody verifies it.
I'm good without accepting the open space and them putting it in their deeds, but that's me.
That comes later then.
Yeah.
Right.
What's
So,
But I thought that all we were going to do tonight is gather all the questions, and the secretary has
what I'm
questions,
trying to
and
find
gather
out,
all
what
the
it is
questions,
they
and then we
want.
figure out, okay, we'll search all the records, we'll find out what they are. If there are differences of interpretation, we'll come back. The developer will come back at the next meeting, and staff will come back at the next meeting and present, okay, here are the points of contention, and then at that point you can, because I think to some extent the applicant tonight is hearing some concerns they hadn't heard before, and they have to consider them and come back and provide you answers, and then you can evaluate whether they're acceptable answers or not. So that's why I said, let's go through sheet by sheet, make sure we have all the questions, and then we figure out how to get you the
I'd
best
like it, but
answers.
We still
have-
are hung up on the state, I guess,
I
as
have
Kenny's right,
questions,
it's
so-
stabilization. And if that's what
So we
we
know
need
that's a
somebody-
question.
Yes, we have that down as a major issue that has to
But
get
okay.
resolved, and we want to make sure what are the other issues that need to get resolved?
I've got a couple of them in the
I
notes.
just want to see that, I just don't want to continue on stabilization if that's it, because that's all we're getting right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. In the notes that are on the plans here, you guys, there's a note that says wetland soil limits approximated in field by soil scientists without property access. Could you explain to me what that's supposed to mean? And then there also is a note on here that says topsoil is to be preserved during construction to be used for restoration of disturbed escarpment areas. What does that mean? And how is that going to be utilized? These are some concerns for me about what that means, so. And
What was the first note?
It's on sheet 11?
it's on pretty much every
It's
sheet.
on all the sheets.
It's wetland soil limits approximated in field by soil scientists without property access. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the sixth one down under notes. If you look right there,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll have to look in.
Get on the property to look and
Yeah.
see what the land is.
No, normally that means if you're estimating off property.
Correct.
In other words, we go on our property, you can see from the note above, we do wetlands limits verified with hand auger and sketched in field by soil scientists.
Yes, so-
On our piece, they go out and they actually, dig the
Yes.
soil. You can't go on the abutting property to do that. So you estimate off-site. I think that's what they do, but I'll
Microphone, they
confirm.
won't hear you on TV.
Microphone, yes.
So what you're saying is that you did field verify on your property, but not on a budding property?
Is what that note would suggest to me, that they, that they wouldn't go hand auger on somebody else's property.
Yes, okay. And I'm trying to understand what that specifically means. Then what is the other note on that same page on the left side? It says topsoil is to be preserved during construction to be used for restoration of disturbed escarpment areas. Was there a plan? I mean, what is that? How would you do that, utilize that?
They're
When-
planning to disturb the escarpment, I guess.
When they build the road, they remove and stockpile the topsoil. And so any of the escarpment areas that are disturbed, like when we put in this drainage here, when we're working in here, we'll use that topsoil on site. And I don't recall if there was a concern that the developer would sell the topsoil. the topsoil will help
Can't take it out.
stabilize any disturbed areas. So that's
Yes,
what.
I'm thinking to runoff. I mean, all we're concerned about is making sure that that soil stays stable too in those areas. So
Right.
just want to
So-
know what
so-
what the plan is for that topsoil.
Topsoil
where you're
that's
going with
taken
it.
here, taken off the road is not going to go back. So I think there was a concern, must have come up that we would use it off-site, ship it off. This
think
way,
the regs
we'll use it
can do that. They can't take
when
it
we
off-site.
disturb an escarpment area.
Kenny,
Is there a list of the waivers, or are there any waivers you're asking for in this subdivision? 'Cause, I mean, there was rumor no sidewalk. And I mean, I don't have a list of,
I think there were 2 in the package that were listed on the sheet, but I think there are going to be more.
We'll get to those at the end.
Could I just briefly explain the drainage of the escarpment? And after we go through it, Richard, then we'll have all the comments. I just don't want to get
You want
into
to go
back
by,
and forth.
I thought, aren't there other areas you have to cover?
Yeah,
I mean,
I do, yeah.
Right.
and Roger
There are other
already
areas
said,
I wanna
let's go
touch on, of
start at
course.
the beginning and go through things, or whatever.
I think what the applicant is saying is, can he make his presentation and then go back and ask questions and answers rather than as it goes along, and it's up to you.
No, that's what I think, we're getting lost.
So the point I was trying to make was existing conditions, all this land drains just surface flow, and it goes sheet flow until it finds a low spot, and then it gets shallow concentrated flow and goes down the escarpments. In the proposed conditions, we're cutting off a lot of that, picking it up in the street, bringing it to the detention basin. There's a profile here. Bringing it down in pipes and drop catch basins and drop manholes to the bottom of the basin, where we've now slowed the velocity down and to the point where we can release it at the bottom into this channel.
farther up the channel.
Right.
So we're taking the water from the lower part of the subdivision, bringing it back to the top. So it's gonna start at the top of the channel and run all the way down, where currently it's just running
Well,
straight back,
It's running
straight back, yep.
down the escarpment,
So you're
and
saying
that's
the
what's
pitch of the
causing the
drainage is
erosion.
going towards Simon Road and then over to the gully.
Yeah,
So in other words, we're
this
taking
piece.
water that's already down the gully, we're bringing it back to the top of the gully.
No,
No.
no, we can't get it up the hill.
Well, in drainage you can if you
Didn't
pitch
they
your
last
drainage.
time have
But
some
your
kind of a
detention pond's up
pumping in their
the road,
station?
right?
The detention, yeah, the detention, well, the outlet to the detention basin is here,
Right, and if the houses are here, the water's running up, over to the drain,
coming up, and
over to the
and it's
drain,
releasing
running
here.
back down. So we're increasing the velocity of the water upstream. Where
From
right
he-
now, it's all running sheet straight back, except for in here. We're slowly all the way down. We're taking all this water now, bringing it up, running it in. So like Richard said, we're taking a 24-inch garden hose all the way at the top and running back down. You're increasing quite a bit of drainage at the top of that it's never had before. Would you
No.
agree with that?
By the time it gets to here, it's had all that drainage. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
All that drainage is in this channel. And all I'm trying to say is that the theory was we're reducing the water that gets to these escarpments. These escarpments erode because water flows down through them. Not because this brook is here. It's because water flows down through them, and it becomes concentrated flow at the top of the escarpments. We're cutting off a lot of that water. That's all. That's just the philosophy behind the drainage system near the escarpments.
They're not cutting it off. They're moving it upstream.
This is the open space area. Oh, yeah. It was the one that, sheet 10. Oh, yes.
He's very poor presenter.
It's going to get wide. Down, it's going to go wide.
Yeah, that side road is, yeah.
So there's that large escarpment here, sheet 10. Is it sheet 10? Yes. These are just the houses that are along the escarpments. There's that big channel here
Been doing the escarpment.
that runs across it. No drainage goes into that channel. This area is brought around to the top over here, and then beyond the channel is brought around. I believe it's brought around to the other detention basin. Oh, I'm sorry. Here's the other detention basin. Brought around to the other detention basin, which has an outlet down by the Scantic
Who's the designer?
River.
Down at the bottom?
Yes. Oh, I'll get to that. I just want to show that we're, again, not putting any runoff into this channel, and a lot of runoff comes down this hill and down this way. And again, we're picking up what flows in the road. We don't have any houses here. These houses, same thing. I'm looking for here's the crest of the hill, and this flows this way. This flows this way. We're picking up this area and bringing it to the detention basin over here. So again, we're reducing runoff that goes to the escarpments. Yeah, I think that's it. And this is the outfall from the detention basin. This is on sheet 12. This is the outfall. We're bringing it down into this large wetland area. Again, all the drainage design, pipe by pipe, catch basin by catch basin, was reviewed by the town engineer, and the escarpments was addressed by the geologists, Clarence Welty and Haley and Aldrich.
What is the drop from the detention pond to the wetland?
To here?
Yeah.
Where's
the elevation 50?
No, I'm all set. Rich got it for me.
What is it?
Thank you.
It's 36 feet at best and 44 feet at worst. If the detention basin is entirely full, there's 44 feet ahead. If it's just flowing out of the bottom of the detention basin, there's 36 feet ahead. So basically, that's a lot of potential energy existing in those pipes. And
it's not, that's not correct. It's not 36 feet ahead. There's not. It's not 36 feet ahead. You know what head is, and I don't want to explain it to everybody. There's not a full pipe sitting there pushing 36 feet ahead out the bottom. That isn't how a drainage system works.
We understand that. The rest of us too, or most of us at least. I assume all
So
of
it's
us
not
do.
this geyser coming out here. It's all the velocities are calculated, and the drop structures kill a lot of the velocity. That's why they're there. That's why we put them there. So we have pipe slopes. The drainage calculations show the velocity in each piece of pipe during the design storm, which is a 25-year storm. But the detention basin is designed to detain flows to the 100-year storm. So velocities and head is addressed all the way down to the bottom.
May I ask who would maintain the drainage pond and the pipes, and who would pay for that in this?
I believe the town the town will own the detention basins.
Thank you.
It'll be part of the drainage system.
We don't.
If the town accepts them, when they accept the roads, they accept all the drainage with it, and the detention ponds are part of the drainage.
Okay.
That's why the town has very strict guidelines. Even before they accept them, they gotta all be cleaned.
But that's only proposal by the applicant, and that doesn't necessarily have to be accepted if the commission would prefer that.
Yeah,
You know,
we've had
it's
some that we don't take the basins.
right.
They're maintained.
That's so what you have in a lot of these things we're talking about is a proposal, but there are alternate ways to address many of these issues, and so that's why I keep saying we identify the issues, we'll come back with ways to address them.
We don't have to take the basins. Depends on it. Roger was just talking about it.
Every applicant always says the town should take ownership of it. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, I don't know as a policy what the
Has been.
I don't know as a policy what the town has done. So we certainly look at that.
You know a neighborhood in Enfield that we don't own the drainage other than a condo or a planned unit development?
Well, yeah, that's what we're saying.
Oh, right, a condo or planned unit development, we don't own the roads either.
Well,
But any roads we own the drainage in them.
but none of these are going into the town drainage system. This is all internal. None of this.
Yeah, I understood the question not to be the road drainage, Commissioner. I understood the question to be the detention basins.
Correct. That was my question. And I didn't know, I couldn't tell because I don't know if there was a narrative on it. I just didn't know, since drainage is an issue here, who was responsible for maintaining that drainage system down the escarpment.
So I guess we're sort of through drainage at this point, and I can go on to.
Yes, for now, I'm sure.
For now, I know there's questions.
And just for the record, you need to submit updated drainage calculations that are consistent with the plan that you just presented.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's that one.
There is a set that was submitted with this in 2009. I've got to dig it out of my boxes. The town probably has it, but I'll find it. Because what happened. Yep.
Was received October 4th. Is this revised in 2008?
Right.
So
That-
this doesn't tie into your map.
You're correct. There is a supplement that what I was trying to say, did submit to wetlands, revised in 2009. We'll get you that set as part of a follow-up.
I would suggest that since you've actually taken out the two lots,
Yep.
the drainage calculations ought to match what you
Yeah.
presented.
The intent was probably to give you the old one that was in 2009, and then give you an updated so you have the comparative. So moving on from that, the next issue we wanted to address was get it here, was traffic. There was a traffic report that we submitted when we did the initial application, and it did show basically a level of service on Simon Road and very little impact with regard to the subdivision, with regard to traffic. It has good sight lines. Again, the intersection, as we've designed it, was rated basically A overall by the traffic people. That, I think we've included that as a copy in
I don't
the
see that
package.
in my packet.
No, I don't, there isn't
Okay.
that, it's not in the packet, and also there's no comments concerning the interior by the local police department.
Right.
All we have is, he's talking about Simon Road, but we're
Right.
also want his comments on the interior road work
Yeah,
and
I-
signage.
I don't have I have nothing from traffic. I don't know, Roger, if they've responded.
Well,
or
no,
not.
the only thing he
Yeah.
had for us was that Simon Road ought to be able to handle it.
Well,
Right.
it should be able to handle it, but when it gets down to the four-way stop, that's going to dump a lot of traffic
Well,
onto
yeah,
that.
but that's up to that's what I'm trying to say, is we need to really have a full report from the traffic safety officer.
And also any original traffic study that was done, because I don't have that in my packet.
None of us do.
Right.
No, that wasn't submitted as part of the
Okay,
application.
I will get you a copy of
It
later.
was, it is in the 2009 P and Z file, but you didn't resubmit it as part
Okay.
of this application.
I will submit that.
You might want to just go through for those commissioners who aren't familiar what a level A means and what classifications there are.
Basically, traffic is assigned a grade. Any intersection is assigned a grade, basically A to F. F obviously being the worst, A being the best. And what our traffic person did in '09 is he studied the traffic on Simon Road, did traffic counts, studied the proposed intersection that we were going to create. And by doing that, what you look at is, first of all, sight line. And can people with a controlled stop sign, which you have at obviously that sort of intersection, how easily can they make left or right turns on the Simon Road? Can that easily be done? Does it interfere with, is it difficult because of traffic? And basically what they study are the peak hours in the morning and the evening when you get most traffic on those kind of roads. And basically from that, they concluded it's basically, I think except for one turn on they have a schedule they show you, it's basically an A intersection, meaning people can easily get in and out. They can go left or right because they have good sight lines and there's not enough heavy traffic to impede that. So that's what it basically means, and we'll get you the full report. And again, usually we've sent that to the your traffic safety officer, and they review it. They also review the internal workings of our subdivision in terms of the roadway. We did do an ART. There were no significant comments from him at that point, but he had to look at it further. So,
And we don't have the ART in our.
What happened on the traffic report was at the ART, the
Right.
traffic safety officer asked you for a copy of the traffic report, and you sent it directly to the traffic safety officer, which then he reviewed it, and his memo coming back, which the chairman says he would like further elaboration on,
Right.
is the only thing that's in the record.
right. I mean, basically, he sent an email basically saying that he didn't see anything changes on Simon Road that would cause it. But I understand you need more than that, Mr. Chairman. I'm not suggesting you don't. I just, the other, so we've talked about the escarpments, we've talked,
Also, if you can, is while you're looking at that, is the fire department too, and interior, because concern on turning radiuses on your cul-de-sac and elsewhere.
right. We did have a report from them in 2009.
Right, but there's been no changes, the road work?
There aren't any, the road we show is the same road in 2009, but I still think as a pro forma, you should get some sort
Well,
of
yeah,
update.
you better have the report at least so we have it.
Yeah, because this is a standalone record.
Right.
So whatever, we have distributed it 3 times to all the agencies. And I have that information to submit for the record whenever you would want it, Mr. Chairman.
Water pollution, the whole series.
Yeah, water pollution did send you a memo, I think, or a letter.
I know, I
have a quick
can't
question.
get at my
Yep.
notes.
While we were talking about roads, and you had mentioned the boulevard style and the dividers in the middle was for safety reasons, like if there were an accident, so people could go around, or what? Can I ask why?
Okay, flip back to that first map.
Okay.
Basically, the concept is that when you have sort of a long road system like this, that you want to make sure you have sufficient access points so that if there's an emergency issue here, that there's not blockage here that would prevent someone from getting back there. So obviously you have the cul-de-sac area, you have this circular road, so at this point, if someone needed, if this was blocked, you could get down the other way. If this was blocked, you could get this way. And the point of using the divided street is it's wide enough, and basically because it's a divided highway, basically, if there's an accident on one side or something and there's an emergency that you needed to access, you can access it through the other side. So when I say that's the safety issue, is to make sure that you reasonably can access the site, the roadways with emergency vehicles or whatever, if there's a block somewhere
It's going
along
to be
the
a
way.
waiver, I'm
So
sure.
that's
He doesn't have it listed.
those don't become too distant.
He wants
You know what I'm saying?
Cape Cod curbs.
The theory is you wouldn't be allowed to run road, say eliminate this and run it all the way down because it's too far. You know, if it's blocked here, you can't get to there. And some distance is allowable. And so the best solution, other than actually putting two roads in, separate roads, is to do basically a split highway. So you have 20 feet of roadway on each side. And it's obviously, is one in and one out. But obviously in case of an emergency and you have the islands, you can cut around the islands. So that's the theory behind that. Basically, what else we've given to the commission is, in terms of the building and the phasing, it's designed on the plan to be done in 3 phases. The first phase basically being the boulevard, a little beyond the boulevard section. The second phase being basically, if you will, the roadway, almost the whole roadway loop. And then the third phase being the cul-de-sac at the end. That's the proposed phasing. We could do it. We wouldn't propose to do more phases. We might combine, for example, 1 and 2 and do them both together, just easier. In other words, when you phase, we're talking about the actual construction of the subdivision. So it would be like here, and then here. We may, in fact, do it from here all the way to here, which you can do, and then use this as a temporary cul-de-sac. So, and then the other issue usually you submit with an open space is, what's the plan in terms of price point? We're indicating, 290,000 of 450, 490,000 would be the price point for the homes in the subdivision. Again, it depends, 1,800 square feet to 2,500 square feet homes, depending on what the individual purchaser wanted. Some lots are larger than others and may be more conducive to sort of a larger home kind of thing, thinking of like Lot 35 or Lot 8 or something like that, which has more acreage. So, I mean, that's sort of the sense of where the owners and developers want to go with it in terms of that. It does have water and sewer to the site. There is.
Do you have certification from the water company yet that they can serve that? I didn't see that.
I do have.
That would include the hydrants and the whole.
There was back in 2009 a letter from them indicating there was sufficient. There was a.
But that was at that time, wasn't it? I don't know if their
Right.
demands have changed and they've increased. I don't know if they'd have to reevaluate it.
I will get that also updated from the water company. My understanding is that there isn't a problem, but we'll get it updated.
Well, if they've added anything else or done anything different to their
Yeah, there's
lines,
nothing
I
been
don't know.
added in that area that would require large water usage along Simon Road, but, you know.
No, I know that, but I mean elsewhere, is it, what company is it? Hazardville?
That's Hazardville Water, I'm sorry. I said Connecticut, I meant Hazardville, yeah. The system in Simon Road is Hazardville Water.
So I don't know what
Yep.
additions or subtractions they've had. You mentioned also while you're going on that you would have restrictions put on the deed. Would you make a list of those so that we have the list?
Yeah, actually, I'll take them, you know, they're set forth in the wetlands permit, but I'll take them off there and give them to you in a listing form.
Thank
It's
you.
easier.
Yeah, just so that we know when we're
Right.
getting down to the final end.
Right, and basically those restrictions really sort of dealt with, again, going in front of the camera, but.
No, I understand. You're already
Department,
listening.
yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, there was a question earlier from one of the commissioners, and it would be helpful because you have the wetlands the wetlands approval that refers to certain lot numbers, but then you've eliminated 2 lots. So we really need a cross guide to, so like if the wetland permit is saying whatever on lot
Right.
22, is that the still lot 22 on this revised one, or is it a little different? So we do need a
We'll give you
cross-reference list.
Yeah, we'll give it, and I think they actually changed because I think we eliminated 1 and 2 and then renumbered from that 1 and 2. So there may be some change on that side. Happy to do that.
I think for the first full count.
No? You think
I
it
don't
is?
know, yeah, I don't
Okay,
know.
we'll check.
Okay.
We'll double check.
I just have a question about the boulevard, as you're calling it, or the dividers. You know, Enfield goes through spurts where they'll put in a median, you know, in a road to try to control traffic. 5 years later, they're pulling it out because the only thing it does is create accidents instead of saving them. Is that a want of the developer, or was that a request from the town? I guess I'm trying to understand why you would put an obstruction in the road. I mean, if you put a right turn only and then, you know, and had 4 lanes, you know, 2 in, 2 out, to me, you got a lot more space there to move traffic than you do when you put a 5-foot median.
Yeah, well, first of all, because it's not a high volume area of traffic.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, you got 36 homes, so you're not generating a huge. So the sense was, and they did quite a bit of, they met quite a bit with staff. They did a bunch of ARTs back then. Everybody seemed to be most comfortable with this as a good way to sort of solve the problem, but make it, you know, sort of look, like you said, you could do a 4-lane road there, but when you think about that, for what you have, it's sort of, you know what I'm saying, it seems excessive, you know? And sort of the idea with the islands is you break it up, it looks more neighborhood friendly. And there's a lot of places, you go through Connecticut, that have the divided highway like this with islands, and it looks very nice, right? It can be, you know what I'm saying, softer. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it was sort of, it was well received, frankly, by staff, and it seemed to make sense, and at the same time address the fire and police in terms of, hey, you know, if we have to get down there, we want to make sure, you know what I'm saying? There's plenty of roadways so that we can do that. So it seemed like the best fit,
Right,
Commissioner, for what we had.
My concern would be just, you know, you're adding another stipulation with a homeowner association to maintain these. It's just another, you know, blip on the title or deed to these houses for something that's, I don't see it, but, I mean, if the developer's okay with it, I guess it doesn't matter to me either way, but,
Listen, you know, I mean, some of these open space developments we've done, and I've done in other towns, are a little bit, you're right, more sophisticated, because you have a little bit more responsibility for the homeowner. I mean, there is going to have to be an active association that has to, you know, be funded, right? Because maintenance is going to, somebody's got to be hired to do that. Although, I've had it in other areas. We did some of these in Summers, you know, and the homeowners sort of that live there kind of are happy to maintain them because it's, you know,
right,
it's in front of your house. kind of thing.
absolutely.
So, you know, sometimes that's how they work out. And basically with the same concept that once you get into the loop, then you're okay. You can sort of pare down the
That's where
road.
it falls
But
apart.
before you do that, you want to make sure that it's wide enough so you can and have good fire and police access or emergency really access.
But with the homeowner association, you're not classifying this as a PUD?
No, no,
No,
no.
it's-
Each lot is owned and individually maintained by the homeowner. The only thing that would go in there are, you know, crossover is the maintenance rights in the, really there's 3 islands, if you will, 4 feet wide.
Yep.
And then again, maybe to your point is, and we can do a hybrid. Frankly, we don't have to do it all one way, but we could hybrid this into the association as their responsibility. But, you know, if you wanted the land trust, for example, to maintain the Scantic, where again, you know, you're not going to have that problem, right? You might be able to give that 50, because it's 15 acres, it's large enough that a land trust might consider it. But this sort of stays in with the homeowners because of the issue that you don't want. So maybe that's a way to solve both, you know, to solve that puzzle in a way that everybody thinks works the best. I mean, you can do it that way because they're separate.
I think that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that idea.
So, I mean, that way, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
The homeowners basically accept that issue. And again, you know, it's an upfront thing. It's not sort of a hidden thing. Part of the requirements in wetlands is, you know, you got to be upfront, you got to tell people what these issues are, and you can certainly put that on as a condition also, that they're aware, you know what I'm saying, that this is their responsibility.
And it affects them directly, so
Right,
they're going to be
exactly.
the enforcers,
Right.
you know?
And then sort of
Yeah.
take the 15 acres down below, we can explore giving that to the land trust, because again, that doesn't have that liability issue, and it might be something, because it's basically the Scantic that they'd be more interested in.
Well, yeah, because the Scantic River Association is interested in that.
Right.
So-
So it wouldn't go to the land trust, it'd go to them.
Right.
Well, whoever would like to take the
Yeah, I mean,
responsibility. I mean,
if they
that's what
would,
he's
if they
saying.
would like to do it. I mean, my only concern, frankly, is I don't want someone to sort of try to turn it into sort of a active recreational area, because I don't think it's.
Well, you want somebody that knows
Yeah.
the business
Right.
and can
But
take care of it, know
If
what
at
they're
the end of the
doing.
day, they can do it and maintain it and work it that way, that's fine, you know? Because it does have, when we had discussed it before this commission, the question was, you know, if people were going to use it, could they park here? And yeah, the answer is yeah. I mean, we'd have restricted parking here because of the access issue, but, you know, again, the idea would be more just to maintain it as part of, what do they call it, the River Green or Green River area or something like that?
That's a heck of a
A
walk
greenway,
down
yeah.
that slope. to
Yeah,
get-
yeah, it is,
I
right.
mean, I don't, it just as long as
Actually,
the town
there's-
has access to get in.
Yeah, there's parts where it actually isn't, I mean, there is a way to get down, I think, through here or
There
something.
was before, as I recall, back through there's a path.
I like that last idea.
So, you know,
Very good.
just a thought.
Yep.
Go on.
No, I thought
want my
it came
jacket?
off the cul-de-sac because it went between the two properties there.
So, other than to try to get you the additional material and answer your questions at the next meeting, unless anybody has some additional questions, or,
I had Mr. Chair, if I would, a question about the sidewalk proposed waiver. I was just curious what conditions affect this land that don't affect other land where we require sidewalks,
well, I think the plans show sidewalks.
right?
So-
And so I'm just curious why the waiver's in there, or,
I mean, here's the theory behind waiver, and again, we've designed them in, so if there's not a waiver, that's fine. The theory behind a waiver is there's no interconnecting sidewalk system in that area of town at all. that you can put them internally, but Simon Road doesn't have any, I don't believe.
No.
So,
Up north.
up north,
Up north, I think, the next.
Yeah, Weymouth
the next
Road down
intersection,
does.
right?
yeah.
Yeah, actually, coming down Simon Road on the other side of the street has them.
On the west
up-
side.
Yeah,
But that stop sign,
Yeah,
right?
it stops at the
Just
stop
north of the
sign.
pump station
Yeah.
access way, yeah.
I know it's a lot cheaper for the town to connect them than it is to put them in, so.
So, I mean, the theory is, you know, it's,
Then they
we're
tear 'em
happy to
up.
do it, but it's a liability issue ultimately for the town down the road because in whatever many years. So, you know, the
But
waiver was.
you do show them
We do show them. So
on one side.
on one side, which is.
All
I
the
think,
way
what's
through.
Required.
Waiver?
Well, there's a list in the application itself. It says they're requesting a sidewalk waiver.
Well, you don't have to give it to them. They're
Right, and so
requesting
my,
it, so
my
they're
question
putting
is, if
it
they're shown in the plans, what does the waiver refer to? If they're built into the plans, then is there a waiver to act on at all?
Yes, they're asking for it, but if you don't give it to them,
Then the
it's
plans are
there.
It's already shown.
Yeah,
on there,
we've already built it in, so if we didn't show them, we asked for the waiver and you said, no, now we got to redesign the whole thing and bring it to you. and
Okay,
say, What's
so-
the point of that? It's easier to take them out than it is to add them in.
Okay, so then my question is, if you still want us to consider the sidewalk waiver, can you explain what aspects of this land are different from other land where we require sidewalks?
Again.
Because that's the standard for waiver,
Right.
from my reading of the rules.
Well, normally, again, it's interconnectivity. In other words, they work okay internally, but externally, they really won't connect anything.
Right.
So do you want to have sidewalks that then put people sort of out into the road where there's no sidewalks? If that's ultimately you're saying, look, we're going to put sidewalks in that area, we're going to extend them and whatever, then you'll want sidewalks. If you're not going to extend them down that, if that's philosophically what the town isn't going to do, then the idea of sidewalks probably isn't that helpful. I mean, this is not sort of a real pedestrian subdivision. It's obviously not a heavily trafficked subdivision, so if someone's walking in there, you know what I'm saying, even on the roadway, it's not a real dangerous situation because it's a small subdivision with the single outlet. So that, I mean, that's the theory behind it. How you guys want to do that, it's.
So you'd be okay with the parent pushing the baby carriage in
Yeah,
the street?
that's the other thing. The parents sometimes like to
Right.
have sidewalks to walk on.
Right. Listen,
With
I
their
push a
kids.
baby carriage in the street all the time
Or
in
the
Suffolk,
dog.
so yeah,
Yeah.
just don't push them into the cars.
You
So
might
I just
want to
wanna
walk
be-
the dog or something.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I just want to be clear, though, the condition that you're saying that makes it impracticable to put sidewalks here is not relating to this land specifically, but solely relating to the fact that it wouldn't interconnect immediately outside the proposed subdivision.
Right, and in
you.
some towns, again, they have a plan about where they're putting sidewalks and where they aren't. And sometimes where they're not, in an area where they're not putting them, they don't want sidewalks because it's just not going to work, and it becomes, again, a maintenance issue 30 years from now for some internal sidewalks that don't really go
For
anywhere.
example, they
But
just
again,
tore out some of ours.
So,
It's got them in the middle of the woods.
Yeah.
Start nowhere and end nowhere.
right, and so, again, ultimately, that's the commission's decision. We built them in because that way, if you say, no, we want the sidewalks, they're designed, they're part of the design, they've been reviewed by your design team, by your engineers and so forth, so we're all set to go.
So you've got a decision between now and when you vote. Yes, Mr. Rich.
Could I get some additional clarification on what's going on Chelsea Way at Station 61, where you have that road crossing over to wetlands? And, you know, I guess it's not exactly clear exactly what's going on there. Initially, I had thought that, you know, the catch basin was draining into the wetlands, but I was, you know, sort of advised that it's not, but I don't see any real documentation as to what is going on there. So could you explain that to me?
It's an 11. 10. 10, okay. So which one do you want, Jim?
You're on until it comes back.
61.
Hope another one's going.
Go away.
Because it appears that catch basin 29A is connecting to something, or something's connecting to catch basin 29A. So
Yeah.
could you sort of clarify exactly what's going on there? And could the drawings be, I guess, updated to reflect what you're going to tell me so that there's no confusion?
If you look at, what sheet are we on there?
Use the mic. 10.
Sheet 17 has the plan and profile, which shows it in more detail as far as invert elevations, et cetera. But sheet 10 is the other way. There's just a lot going on.
Yeah, it's not clear to me in terms of what's going on 17, but, you know, the thing is, if it's clear on a plan, then I guess
On sheet 10, look at sheet 10.
Right.
What it is you see the wetland flags, 122, 123, and 124.
Right.
And then there's a low point there. Because the road is in fill, because we're directing water away from that long escarpment ravine. So the road is in fill, so the road is up higher than the existing ground there. And what it does is it's making a pocket where that wetlands is. So it's hard to see. You can see it by the 108 contour. There's
Right. What is that?
That's a head wall.
Well, shouldn't it say a head wall in terms of, you know, can't you?
Right below it, sir.
Right below. It says
below it.
concrete head wall, flow line 105.0, 18 inch. And then on sheet 17, which is the
It's not-
plan and
but
profile.
It's not pointing to it. Should there be some, like, riprap around that head wall or something, or?
No,
as
it's
it collects
not,
water, or-
it's not a big drainage area. I mean,
So is that
it's just
flowing?
a low spot. It's going to be, it would be become a puddle. So they put a head wall there, and we pick it up and put it into the drainage system. And actually, there probably is a sizable drainage area because it's an 18-inch pipe.
It goes down the drainage, down and into your detention basin.
Right, right. So that's just a head wall. The water goes there and goes into the pipe. So it's not a discharge point, it's an inlet into the drainage system. Because there's that internal wetland area there that's inside the.
Right, because I wasn't exactly clear what was going on there. In terms of that head wall is so far away and it's not really pointing towards anything. So I just thought that head wall was sort of just floating in space somewhere.
No, like I said, every inch of this system has been designed and reviewed.
Okay. Could you actually review your designations of your lots and you know, some of the nomenclature? Because I noticed that there's a lot of, you know, lots that are off by at least, you know, two, you know, things, and you're looking at lot number 2 and it's talking about lot number 4, you're looking at lot number 3, it's talking about lot number 5, and it's like, it gets really confusing.
Right.
Because are there going to be footing drains around all these buildings?
Has to be.
You know, because you don't show any drains, or you don't show any, you know, I think you show your sanitary laterals, but you don't show any footing drains and where they're running and what they're running to?
I thought we had a note. That the footing drains and roof leaders would be attached.
Can you make that as a question that they have to answer next time if you can't find them?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
We, you know, and with the lot numbers, we dropped those 2 lots just recently, and we'll have to double check to make sure we get all the.
Because another thing that I just noticed looking at the wetlands approval is I guess their special condition number 18. It says all roof leaders for the project, with the exception of lots 29 through 37, shall be designed with an infiltration or reuse system, size to hold 1 inch of runoff from the roof area at a minimum. So is that like a rain garden in terms of, are you supposed to provide a rain garden at every single house?
Originally,
No,
that's what
I
they
believe
did.
it was like an infiltrator system,
So do you show
dry
that
well.
on, your plans anywhere as to what
There's
you're
a
doing?
note, there's a note for it. I saw the note. I went and checked
Yeah,
that,
it's
made
just
sure that
handled
it,
by a note.
Yeah,
there was a
but
note on
isn't
there
that going to
about
get
it, but I don't
lost? It's one of those kind of things where if it's not on the drawings and people have to look at a note that a lot of times, the guy might not know how to read and all of a sudden he doesn't see it on the drawing, so he said, I didn't know I had to put it there?
It's a condition of,
Yeah, it's a condition of approval that the town staff, when you build an individual lot, you have to show it all on a basically like an as-built, and even before that,
a plot plan.
a plot
yeah.
plan. And you're not gonna show it on every plan because the house may change a little bit. We designate an area where you can fit the house. It may change a little bit. It may be a little bigger, it may be a little smaller, it may move a little forward, it may move a little back. So to sort of like plot a house on every one of these at this point is never done. I wouldn't think, John, right?
No. We show the houses, as we call them, possible building areas. When any one of these lots is developed, anywhere in town, but every lot has a detailed plot plan that has the architectural footprint of the house. We set an actual top of footing elevation. We show the footing drains. You show if it's supposed to have an infiltration system, you show that. You show elevations. It's a detailed plot plan.
Because again, along those lines, in terms of if I was to look at your lot 34, and you show a possible building area, and
Right.
basically you also show a 65-foot, from the top of the slope for, it says lots 35, 36, and 37, but in reality, it should be 34 in there too somewhere. 33, 34, and 35 maybe. But when I look at, that possible building area and, the location of your 65-foot, designation from top of slope, and if I scale back, basically, if I go directly behind the house, I'll hit that 100 contour line. But then if I go over to the right and I follow that 100 contour line and then I measure off that 100 contour line towards the possible building area, I'm actually overlapping that possible building area by, 15 feet. I would think that, your 55 foot from the top of slope should be at a constant elevation. If the top of slope is at 100 there, it should be at 100 to the side of the house too, not necessarily down the slope a little bit, only to make it convenient. And I find that kind of confusing as to, why the top of slope wouldn't be at a constant elevation, because it would be at the top of slope.
The top of slope during our lengthy wetlands application, the top of slope was determined to be, and I don't remember what the slope was. It was like where it reached 4-to-1 or,
But realistically, if I follow those contour lines, they don't change very much there. It's not like, all of a sudden it becomes flat. If I follow those contour lines, it becomes a little flatter, but it's not significantly flatter.
You got the 100 here, you got 102.
So you want him to come back with an answer?
Right. Could you look into
Just
that?
come back with an answer.
Let's come back with an answer, right?
right,
That's on lot
Well,
35 in terms.
34.
34, I'm sorry.
34.
It's 34, but it might be a different number. So, what I mean? We might want to,
If it's 34 on this one, it'll-
on the highway, when they say exit 22, formerly exit 44,
there you go.
you might have to have a guide like that.
Okay.
Any other further questions you want when they return, or anything else you want answered? Attorney Smith, are you caught up now with what you were going to do?
Yeah, I think we're all set. Obviously, there is that jiggly issue about, I'm going to look at providing you with additional information on that drainage issue and the escarpments and all of that.
Right.
I guess you'll have to consider whether you'd want to hire but But I would, my first thought is, let me see if I can get more information.
Well, I don't know what we
Yeah.
do, because their question was, as Kenny said, it just boiled down to one item, not the whole thing.
Yeah, I guess I would just like the geotechnical engineer who made those recommendations actually address, does he think, long-term it would be in the best interest of the project, or does he think that,
fair statement about- right.
long-term it's in the best interest of the developer? And basically,
Absolutely.
I'm looking after the town and you're looking after the developer, and
Absolutely.
and we have a difference in opinion. So
So I will reach out and try to
The
get some real
stabilization,
information
that's
on
all
it.
they're asking.
Thank you.
Okay, and,
You're going to go to the public, Mr.
right,
Chairman?
but do you have anything first?
No, I have a lot of information that has to get entered into the record, but it's more housekeeping that can be done at the next meeting.
Oh, okay, I didn't know if you had
yeah,
anything
no,
you wanted them to pull in.
And we also, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, would like to have a conversation with the applicant about different options for maintenance as well.
Right,
to
because
address
you
that
suggested
issue.
other things to me when I asked
Right,
you.
so
about-
that, we come back with some
And Kenny
alternatives
had
that you
some
can
good
look at.
suggestions too, so I think, rather than, as Kenny says, and that's why I first asked about having the land trust, is get it off the town.
Right,
I wouldn't
having,
count it as open space either. I
Well-
mean, they can put it in a association, but why would the town
Well,
accept
then-
it as open space then?
But then also, like Kenny said, break it up. Down by the river could go one place or yeah. So,
having been the president of a land trust for many years in the town of Hamden, I would just say that the land trust ought to have a steady source of income to provide the maintenance issues. And so I love the idea of the land trust, but I have some ideas of how that might be funded, and we can put that in place to address those issues.
okay, that'd be good. Okay, then I'll,
Just, if there's, the comments from even the town engineer, there's no comment yet.
okay.
I mean, this subdivision's been going on for years and years.
Do we have to
Can we
update
get
those,
these
or are they the
answers?
same, or
I've had several conversations with the town engineer, and we're in constant dialogue with the applicant. And basically, the town engineer is not going to finalize his report until we get the updated drainage calcs.
okay. But that's another thing, then you have a list of somebody else we need. Anything further? Okay.
Well, like even the fire department, they don't have a comment.
Well, that's
The
what I
water
asked,
company
the
don't
water
have a
company,
comment.
fire department, you're
I
right.
mean, let's get these comments, because that's got a lot to do with our decision also.
Oh, absolutely, yep.
Maybe the latest ART notes.
I'm sorry?
Maybe the latest ART notes for our packet.
Yeah, we should have the latest ART. I've asked for that, too.
Right.
Okay.
Well, there was a prior ART, but is this currently an ART now?
I'm
There
sorry.
was an ART,
ART was done in
in the
09.
fall, there was an ART,
Oh,
and at that ART, it was attended by most of the entities that comment. It was also attended by the chairperson of the Conservation Commission. And as a result of that ART, the applicant withdrew the submission, that original submission, and submitted the revised plans. And basically, the purpose of that was that there had been substantial changes from what was approved from wetlands, and we had advised the applicant that they would have to go back to wetlands if they wanted to move forward with those sets of plans, so they withdrew them and submitted plans that, except for the two lots being reduced at this point in time, appeared to be consistent with the approval from wetlands. And so there was discussion at the RT, and we will get you the notes about the roadway system. The water company was there, and they discussed the water pressure and so forth, but you need all that documentation.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay. if
I
you're
have
done-
nothing further than at this point.
Nothing further? Okay, let me open it to the public then, if you vacate the seats. Anyone in the public would like to address the commission, either in favor or against? Anyone in the public would like to speak in favor or against the application? Please come forward. We request your name and address for the record.
Yes, my name is Ellen Martin. I live on 6 Patricia Circle, and the development that they're proposing is a little bit down the street. My Star property is between myself and the development, so we're kind of like abutters. I first want to turn this in, and I don't know whether I turn this into the secretary or whoever.
Secretary, well, give it, they stamp it, yes.
And I also want to preface this by saying I'm glad to hear the questions that came out of this planning and zoning meeting. I really am. This is the first time that I've heard a lot of things that were addressed are readdressed, and that's a good thing. Very good comments. There's a document that I became aware of, and I think all of you are now aware of it as well, the Town of Enfield's Plan of Conservation and Development. That plan takes into consideration what the residents of this town want for their town. Their public forums, focus groups, community surveys, all used to generate what the residents are desiring in their town. A plan such as this, with community input and adopted by the town, should serve as a central guiding force for the town. And I'm sensing that most of you have looked at it and have read through it because of the comments that I'm hearing, and that's good, because a lot of what you do, you're tasked with a lot of the responsibility for ensuring that the leadership and the implementation of this plan follows through, and that's good. I'm seeing things that I have not seen in the past, and it's a good feel. Part of the plan's vision statement includes that we treasure our vast resources, specifically our 2 major waterways, the Connecticut and the Scantic Rivers. We see extensive wetlands as a valuable resource to be protected and used wisely. They are an oasis of water, vegetation, and wildlife that gives us respite. And we are committed, this town is, to making them accessible to everyone and every neighborhood. The area of the proposed subdivision, as we all know, lies within the Riverbelt Greenway, an area that offers many environmental challenges, as, again, you've all seen. An area with extensive wetlands that needs to be protected and used wisely. And it's because of the environmental changes, the environmental challenges, that I, like many of our fellow Enfield residents, feel the need to preserve and enhance the ecology and natural resources of Enfield. And that's one of the 3 goals of the Plan of Conservation and Development. I am not one to stand in the way of progress. I am not one to stand in the way of people being able to do what they want with the land they own, as long as the impact of what they want does not impede the safety and well-being of others, and as long as the impact of what they want doesn't negatively impact the environment. After all, it's our town, and we should all strive for the best. With that in mind, I'd like to present a few of my concerns that I've had since following this since 2007 concerning this subdivision. This has come before Planning and Zoning a few times, and each time areas of concern have been raised regarding the environmental challenges that this area presents. And since I've been hearing all what you say, a lot of what I say is repetitious, but I think I want to say it anyway. I took time to look at old plans and new plans. I went down to Planning and Zoning and got copies of the plans, just so that I could at least get a better handle on it. I'm not a developer, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a builder or a planner. So reading and understanding them is not top of my list. However, it appears that it has changed a little bit. And with that in mind, I am hoping at the very least that the same care will be taken in processing this application that was taken with the one that was processed in 2009. Since inland wetlands is the first stop in the process, and the last information that we got from inland wetlands was in 2009, I would hope that they are contacted again and brought into the loop to make sure that things have not changed, just like on their list that's on top of your plans. Lists, as you said before, different lot numbers that may be affected, all that needs to be addressed. It should be addressed. It was done 9 years ago. Although I did hear somebody say when they walked the land, they didn't really see any difference or took pictures, didn't notice the difference. As we all know, it's been some heavy rains that we've had climate change, we've had environmental issues, and with all the problems that we've had in this town with erosion, I think we would definitely want to stay on top of that, especially because it is extensively a lot of wetlands. The main difference between the 2009 application and the current application, as I see it, in 2009 they had 38 lots, 2017 they have 36 lots. They list streets. For 2009 they have one long cul-de-sac and one local connector that is also long. Now in 2017 they list one cul-de-sac, short, and 3 local connectors at various feet. In 2009, I was very concerned when I looked at the plans and was following the planning and zoning process. I was really concerned with the length of the long road that went all the way up the cul-de-sac, and the fact that there was only one way in and one way out of that subdivision to the main road, Simon. No matter what you call it, a cul-de-sac and one local connector, or a cul-de-sac and 3 local connectors. Either way, Kerwin Road is still a long road with only one way into the development and one way out. I reviewed the set of plans, and as I said before, I'm not a professional, so please grant me some privilege here. When I'm looking at the current plan, I see 2 streets, Chelsea and Kerwin. I don't see 3 individual connectors. And if you're going to call where streets intersect another street or another connector or something separate, then I would look at Steel Road. You must have about 10 of them there. So does that mean Steel Road is not one long road? It is. It is one long road with a lot of intersections. And for that reason, I'm still equally concerned. That's a long distance, one way in, one way out. Very long. And I would definitely hope that things are looked at as far as fire, as far as police, as far as trash, as far as all the other impacts that it would have having to deal with one long street. I see what the town plows now do to come down my cul-de-sac on Patricia Circle. We used to have the small private plows do our snow in the winter because that's what the town was utilizing. Truck would come down, play around in the cul-de-sac, come back, turn around, come down the street. Now, with the large truck that is used by the town of Enfield, that snowplow drives down Patricia Circle and it backs down the whole street of Patricia before it comes and makes its 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th pass up and backs down the street. And I'm sitting here saying to myself, if he had to do the same thing in Kerwin Road, that's, what, 2,700 feet that this vehicle is going to be backing down. So I would hope that that impact is looked at, because I sit there in the winter and we all stand at the windows and watch the truck come down and back down the street. Back all the way down, and then come back up and make another pass. Now, I'm sure there's a reason for it, but if that's what they're going to do on cul-de-sac streets, that's an awful long street to be doing that on. So I would hope that those kinds of things would be looked at. Again, looking at the plans with regard to open space, because that was my main focus when I started following this in 2007. Again, I'm not a professional, but bear in mind, it was, back in 2007, it was very hard to truly see what the villages were offering for their open space according to their plan. And I know in 2009, the town planner at that time color-coded a map and made little dots on it. I'm seeing a lot of what they did now, because I didn't see that sheet in the original plans. But that helped me to identify where escarpments were, where floodplains were, because I know that question was asked. All this that's part of the space that they're giving to the town. All of that space that the town will be responsible for. All of that space that we all know the town has erosion problems to begin with, spending a lot of money on dealing with them. The 14 acres that they refer to in the back by Lot 35, that 14 acres includes a floodplain. I don't know how much of that 14 acres is in that floodplain, but I'm sure it takes up some part of that 14 acres, so I don't feel that that floodplain should be calculated into usable open space to give back. Okay? I don't know how much of that is, but there is a floodplain. It is on FEMA map. There is a floodplain there. So should that be included? I really don't think so. There's a 0.7 acres on the back of Lot 9. No way to get to it, no way to do anything around it. It's not protecting much, but it's 0.7 acres, which again is something that's included in their calculation of usable space for open space. With the wetlands and the escarpments and the floodplains, much of that land is not usable, either by the builder or by the town. The potential for erosion, drainage problems, all these areas of concern have been brought up 2007, 2009, all the way through. Just look at the conditions that they put on the list of plans from inland wetlands concerning all the problems that that has for approval. You need to look at the concerns that were brought up by the Conservation Commission, by other people in the past. The environment hasn't changed in 9 years. If anything, it's probably eroded a little bit, and a little bit more. We have no idea how long it's going to take for it to erode. But I'm sure some of those same concerns exist today. A good thing to look at, if you haven't already seen it, is the erosion and drainage report, which is on the town website, citing what the town needs to start taking responsibility for and how they're going about doing it. That was a lot of money that they spent to fix things. On the opposite side of the Scantic, okay, where this development is being projected to be built, right on the opposite side of it. A lot of that money was spent to fix erosion problems. So believe me, there's going to be some on this side. What I see the town receiving right now with this open space, and I agree with Mr. Nelson, is more of a liability than an asset, to me. There's no access. There's no way that the townspeople can use any of that space. Yes, we are going to protect it, but that also makes it part of our responsibility. And as a taxpayer, I really wouldn't want to assume any more liability, especially with funding being cut to the towns all over the state of Connecticut. They're hard enough making their budget meet now. If we take on additional liability, the potential liability, it could be 5 years, could be 10 years, could be 20 years. Still, you're taking on a liability. It's not something that I would say is a good exchange. Open space that is useless as a liability, it's a tremendous one for the town. Many groups also have those areas of concern. Many. So what I'm trying to say is I would rather, and agree with Mr. Nelson, put it in the hands of people that own it, will take responsibility for it, and take more stock in the fact that I shouldn't build a pool on my property. Why not? Well, if I do, I could cause erosion. Don't worry about it. Town owns it. So if I call erosion, it's all right. And I'll just put up my pool or put up another building. I find it really hard to imagine that I would buy a house that I couldn't put a pool on, couldn't put a structure on it close to the escarpments. But I understand I'm buying that with that understanding. But who's going to be back there looking at that? Who's going to be back there patrolling it? Who's going to be back there making sure all that doesn't happen? It's nice to put signs up. It's nice to sign a deed saying that that exists. It's nice to have an understanding from the developer that there are going to be potential problems that I would be responsible for, but who's going to monitor that? I am taking that responsibility. And I think because of that, you really need to look at what you are getting back for the town in exchange for giving them open space. They could do a similar development without the open space responsibility. It might mean a few less lots, but they could do it. And that's what my suggestion is to you. I hope you will honor the town's vision and become stewards in its enforcement. Be concerned, be protective of some of our most fragile environment in this town. And I thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Roger, to add to that list, the town highway department, because that's one good item she's raised on access.
Made a note that
to the
DPW
trucks.
should address the snowplow issue.
Yeah, the snowplows and the rubbish. Anyone else? I'm sorry, I have a list here. Michael Dugas. Daniel left. Well, he can come back the next meeting, and then we'll be here. Maureen Nolan. Good to see you again, Maureen.
I was getting stiff there. Maureen Mullen, 1625 King Street. I actually came to the meeting because I hadn't seen the agenda and I thought there was going to be a project near me. But then I got interested in this and I couldn't leave.
There you go.
And I'm
Better than TV, Maureen?
We're glad to have you. That's.
Thank you. Thank you. I haven't even caught up with the papers from last year yet. No, thank you all for being here and doing your part. I know how important it is, and thank you all for doing your parts, and the television crew. Anyway, the reason that I came up here was because it is very interesting, and I was concerned about the drainage issues because of my own situation. And I just wanted to point out one of the concerns I heard was some soil may be relocated during the construction project, and it was during the construction project near me, the Creek School, in case others are not familiar with it on Route 5, that there was soil that was relocated and was left, not with knowledge of the commission. Apparently that came later on.
Oh, yes.
When I reported it. But anyway, during the time that it was relocated, this is the berm that was 22 feet high near Route 5, 34 back further, 270 feet long. We had a summer that included a tornado in East Windsor. We had torrential rains that day, late June, early July. And then early August, we had more torrential rains for hours and hours. And it was so bad that it had flooded Route 5 in front of my home. There was a huge lake of water. It went across the street, and that pile was not protected in any way, so that it was all muddy water that was flowing down through the ditches, under Route 5, going down toward the river and all. And I would just want to be very, very careful about any relocation of soil during the construction process, that there be no damage that would occur, something that would hold back at least the muddy residue that was going through and cause problems for a very long time. I remember, too, there was approval that went through for the whole project. I'm going to say it was in October of 2012. Next year, when they started building, I found out about the relocation of the soil in September, just after the groundbreaking. But when I came in to find out at the P&Z office, and that was prior to your being there, what was going on, nobody seemed to know what was happening. Well, I happened to see the economic development person who had been at the groundbreaking, and he said, "How's everything going?" And I said, "They want to put this huge berm next to my house, within 100 feet. And that's it. He was baffled. He just couldn't believe what was going on. He ran to the town engineer's office. He says, "I'll be right back." He brought the town engineer, who was no longer here, and he knew all about it. And they did locate a copy of the map, which the construction superintendent had shown me at my home. And he knew all about it, but it wasn't in with all of the materials that were supposed to be in the project report. I don't know what the term is for all of those envelopes and all the information. It wasn't there. It was floating around the office, and it was nothing stamped or anything. So I've learned a lot over the years, a whole lot. So now I know the kinds of things that should be looked for. But I just wanted to say, if there are any minor changes, I would like them not just to be brought to the P&Z department, but also to the commission.
They have to be now because of the situation that you were in.
Okay, I just want to make sure that people know that's very, very important. I know with having the river there, we don't need to have
any changes are brought to us.
Okay, that's good.
For approval. They're supposed to be, yeah, that's.
Good. And the other part was that there was land that was in the back part of the project. It was all part of our farm years ago. And there was water that flowed down through this back part into another part next to Mullen Road that we still own. And we were concerned about what's going to happen because the school decided that they would donate the land to the town or the land commission, and it was supposed to be monitored for 5 years, and they had a whole list of things that were supposed to be watched. I've never seen a report that says if that's done or not. So I would say if there are any requirements that are put into a stipulation, with a land trust group or the town of Enfield, if they're supposed to be monitoring, that report be accessible to anyone who would want to see it, to know that things were done properly. And I think the last point that I was going to bring up is I remember having the opportunity. I would go frequently to look at the notes in the office there. Everybody was very helpful afterwards. And I remember one day pulling out ART minute reports. I looked through them and I said, I never said this. I wasn't even at the meeting. But it was a staff representative from the school, I'm going to say perhaps an architect, who had said what Miss Mullen was agreeing to. Miss Mullen didn't have anything like that in her mind even. So if there are any ARTs, if there are any meetings where someone who did not attend the meeting is represented or quoted as saying that those notes should go to that person to be reviewed so that they not just be there in the record and find out that they're false. If I hadn't seen that, I wouldn't have known. And if anybody else looked at it, they say, oh, she's okay with that. I just want to point out those situations. So maybe that's why I was here tonight. Thank you very much, and thank you all for doing your work.
Thank you. Mary Ann Turner.
Mary Ann Turner, 7 Meadow Road. I was here for the last trip around, and pretty much the same things are my questions. Not in any particular order. The Enfield drainage study, when I went to download it on the website, the links are broken, so you can't get it. But I would suggest that you might just want to look at it. But what it really talks about was all the money that the town of Enfield has to have available for erosion problems around town. And I won't bore you with it because it's a few years old. But the bottom line is they were looking like at $500,000 going out for bond. And the real concern about was many of the things that some of the commissioners mentioned tonight was who would own what. And I totally agree that the town should not have any part of it. at all. Because today it may not be a problem, but and we may not even be alive, but it will be somebody's problem. And they did a whole report about erosion issues, so you might just want to take a peek at it. The cul-de-sac, the road, the boulevard part. I'm feeling a little squished here. I was looking at the subdivision rules on page 19, so if you get a second, you might want to take a peek. But it's very clear that there has to be two means of ingress and egress, which basically means that there's two roads out and two roads in, not one road out, one road in. And with the boulevard part in the middle, we don't have any rules for boulevards. And truthfully, you touched on it this evening. I actually don't see the point. It also causes a little bit of an issue, and it was discussed back in the 2009 time that the fire department wasn't in favor of boulevards because of the getting the trucks in and around and back out again. If there's no need for it and you don't have to have it, I don't think you put it in your plans. I think it should be something you take out, in my opinion, but it's also, they don't talk about boulevards because you don't have boulevards. But page 19 might be of some interest to you. There was a long discussion about things that you would put in the deed. I had the privilege of having a PRD built behind my house. I, again, was one of the neighbors. I didn't care that they wanted to build there. Somebody bought the land. They have every right to build what they want to build. The problem I had for the many years, and I'm talking up to 18 years, was consistently breaking the rules or not following the rules or not following the plans that this commission put in front of them. And even today, now this is the only one in town, and they own their house, their land is all, they all own it as a group, but they all have to plow and mow their individual areas. Okay, that's what's really weird about it. But they didn't have a maintenance declaration. That was the first time we learned about it. So the concern I have is the more things that you want to put into these deeds, I am telling you from firsthand experience that the people who buy these houses, either they don't have a great realtor, I mean, I know we have some great ones, but they may not bring everything to their attention, and they may not have great lawyers who also should bring this to their attention. So you're going to put this stuff in there, and I will guarantee you they'll be sitting in this chair telling you that they want to put a shed on their that backdrop yard, they want to put a pool in, they want to extend their building, and you're all going to sit here. Maybe you're all not going to be here. Someone's going to be here, and all of a sudden they're going to forget. I'm telling you, it's a problem, and I know that it's a possibility and you could do it, but I'm letting you know that I don't believe it'll work out. And Pheasant Hill still has issues. They've been very good. They're good neighbors. But every once in a while, things could happen. The homeowners association just doesn't sound like a good idea when we're really talking about a subdivision. One of the things that I'd like, on page 46 of the zoning book, I would just like you to take note that you also don't have an impact analysis. I have not been able to find one, and I didn't see one in the 2009, but you're supposed to have a traffic analysis, and you need to be sure that you consider that the traffic analysis isn't just around the specific area of what coming in and out of this new development off Simon. It has to come further down when you get to the Weymouth Road intersection and stuff like that. But the other part is the page 46, Item D, impact analysis. It's clear. It says an analysis shall be submitted for special residential developments containing 25 or more units showing the anticipated impacts of the proposed development on the town, fiscal and otherwise, including school, capacity by school, public safety services, emergency services, public utilities, recreational facilities, and any other potential demands on the municipal services. You don't have one. I'd suggest you might get one. This one here is just a little bit tricky. And I think you touched on it just a second at the very beginning of your discussions, and then more discussion happened and he didn't answer your question. But I'd like to bring you to the front page of your your map, where it starts talking about the R44 zoning data, the question is, and please understand, I believe they're asking you for an OS 44, which is an open space 44 division, the subdivision, or whatever it's called. And and I took out the table 4.10 area bulk requirements. This is where you talk about it. And it says R44 is 44,000 square feet, and OS 44 is 33,000 square feet. Those numbers need to be looked at on the front here. They don't, these calculations aren't right. They're wrong, as best I can figure out with my calculator. They talk about wetlands, slopes of 15% and 25%. I'm assuming that the wetlands that they're talking about also includes if they're using floodplain, because when I tried to add them up, I couldn't get the calculations to add up properly. But I do know that they used a wetlands or floodplains calculation number in their permitted lot numbers, okay? So the OS 44 says that they can use, I have to find it. Okay, under front yard, side yard, and rear yard, okay, that is front yard, those numbers match up to OS 44. Keep that in mind. So when they do the permitted lots calculation there, it works out, except for the last part of the equation. It's times 1. If you use times 1, then times 1 is R44. They're mixing them up. So R44 says that you have to have 50 feet front, 35 side, 60 feet rear. They're using OS 44, and they're using 40 feet, 30 feet, and 50 feet, which then means they have to use the maximum density equation of 1.25, not 1. Now, it could turn out better for them, right? Because when I did the math, it actually comes down to, instead of 0.73, because they're right when you use it the way they have it here, it actually comes out to 0.59. So all I'm saying to you is the numbers are wrong, but I don't know what makes them right. All right? And the concern I have is if we're going to pull plans from 2009 and we don't take the time to really scour through them for those issues, there's others. And I'm not that talented. So I don't, and again, I know you're all busy, but the office staff has to, I'm strongly encouraging that this dazzle with bulk kind of stuff that you get, somebody's got to sit there and really do the math on it. And you touched on it, Commissioner Scott, when you started to talk about the open space versus unencumbered space. I can't get those numbers to balance because it's clearly stated on page 48 of the zoning book, and then it gets convoluted on the subdivision regulations on page 6. It specifically states that there's a minimum 33% of area of open space shall not be encumbered by wetlands, floodplains, or steep slopes equal to greater than 15%. But they then change it over to the subdivision map of 25%. So you have to pick your poison. That's all I'm saying. It's just that they're just not matching up right. In the end, it may be a moot point. Okay? The part is that it just doesn't quite work. And the other gal touched on the other things, so I'm not going to bore you and repeat them at this late hour.
Mary Ann, the two items that you referred to, did you want to submit them for the record? The drainage thing, and there was one page from the regulations that you asked the commission to read.
Well, they were just kind of my notes.
Oh no, you had the first thing, that one, and then you had a page.
No, I don't want to give you mine. Sorry, nice try. You got to get your late to work. No, it's on your,
I'm just trying to follow procedures, and we have to stamp it as an
I'm
exhibit.
not giving it to you.
Because otherwise,
You can go online and fix the link and get a copy. I can't get another one.
you would have more ability to fix the link than I would.
Nice try. Everything else I have here is just kind of like my own notes.
All right, the one page, though, the second thing you referred to that you were referring to, is that, huh?
Is that from the plans?
Pardon me?
The copy that you have in your hand, that's from their plans that you copied, right? Yeah.
All I did was take off the front cover.
Yes,
Right.
from the front.
You want me to give it to you?
No, it's fine.
We're trying to put everything there, again.
I gave you the page numbers.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's citizens help us out a great deal. It is a very, very welcome for you to do that. And thank you, Mary Ann, and I believe it was Mrs. Martin. And that's what we have our public sessions for, and it's really does one good to have people come in and do that for us. Anyone else would like to address the commission? Anyone else to address the commission? Roger?
But he has to decide, does he want to comment tonight or want to save it until he comes back later and answer them?
Yeah, I think the most sensible thing would be to, we've heard some of the comments. We'll look at some of those things. We'll look at the calculations, certainly, and obviously we had discussed drainage and so forth. So we'll respond at the next meeting, but we'll bring you the additional
And
information.
if you get a chance, sit with Roger on the open spaces, because he did have some good ideas and combine some of the ones that you've heard up here. And maybe, I think, after what I've heard tonight, instead of no land trust for everything, is split it up.
Yeah, and maybe we can do a little jiggling and make it work a little bit better, make it a little bit more palatable for everybody both ways.
Right. And if you can, include that piece in East Windsor with the whatever group it is.
Again, to be honest with you, I have no trouble doing that. I mean, we'll have to look at it because it's, we included it as a lot, and I think we can reduce it. The reluctance to do it initially was the town said, well, we can't really control it, but if we're putting it into a land trust.
Then that's right.
Right, it makes no difference.
No, you can get it in off the road, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Right, and we'll look at that, but then that would actually give you sort of access
But
to this.
there's
which, again,
another thing,
I'm not
and
saying is a
maybe
great
you've
piece.
changed it. For some reason, in my brain, I can remember, and I wasn't at the end, so I don't know if it changed, because I was in the hospital at the time. I think in the houses at the end of the cul-de-sac, there was a pathway down into there between the lots.
Right.
Now, whether that's gone or not under these plans, I don't know, because I don't know the old.
For this, the open space goes right up to the cul-de-sac itself.
Okay, right, yeah.
And here, for this back piece, again,
Oh, no, that one
Yeah.
down, not down towards the river, no.
right, this one towards the river, but we can look at this and do
Okay.
something with that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, given the volume of items that the applicant has to do and submit the revised maps, and then they have to be reviewed and circulated, and we have to get the comments, I would suggest maybe you continue it to your first meeting in March.
That would be satisfactory to us. Yeah, that would be satisfactory.
So if somebody has that motion when we get there,
Make it now or later?
Well, I don't know. They close the meeting, or just, okay, make a motion to continue.
I move to continue this application to the meeting of
The first Thursday in March.
Second.
Motion's made and second, discussion. Only suggestion I have, because, again, I don't know, I expected a much larger group
Yep.
here. Have a light agenda really you have to, because I had even suggested it by itself. It worked out that this really was by itself. But it really has to be, because there's a lot of questions. I'm sure there's still going to be. And it's going to take a while, because you've got all these other people that have got to be involved, too.
Absolutely.
I thank you very much for your work, too, and your help.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the commission. We appreciate it taking the almost 3.5 hours, I guess.
Well.
So it's been, that's fine.
Okay.
Roger.
Did I vote on it? No. Did we?
No, we didn't vote.
Okay. The motion's made and seconded. All in favor? It's unanimous. You have a question for?
I had a question for Roger.
Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't get it. I don't have a full set of the prints. I had them before, but I was told it's a whole new hearing, so I pitched them because
I
I
did
didn't
too.
think we had any need to have those.
I did the same thing. You said they were going to be all new maps, and
Yeah, it's all.
I jumped in.
I would like up-to-date prints.
Yeah, the ones that you received in October, I think were the most recent plan sets.
I didn't get any.
They told me they were for the old.
They said they were for the old ones.
Yeah, there were supplemental plans that were distributed, that were 7 separate sheets. We put them together.
Oh.
I believe you received them in the last
I
packet.
sometime in the next couple of weeks get a
yeah.
copy of.
Yeah.
Well, what you're gonna, they're gonna have to revise the set of plans, which is
Okay.
why we
I
got
would
the
like
month. So you're
the
gonna,
revised ones.
yeah, you're gonna have to get revised ones because, so that we don't have the confusion of what's lot 23 and what's lot
Roger,
24.
please have whoever does the thing not to take my notes out, please. They've taken my cover sheets and everything.
Yeah,
and they just-
one of the issues that we're having is just bring it to the attention of the commission, but what happens is the books stay here, and then when the office staff comes down the next day, a lot of times members have taken stuff out and put them aside, and so then what happens is when the clerk picks them all up, they're, like they're not in every, they're all over the place, and they really don't know whose is whose. So that is an issue which they have raised with us. So
They have to take them out when they take out the things, and they've taken out the active minutes, or the active.
well, what happens is if you take them out and you're working on them, but then they're piled to the side, and then when the clerk comes down, she picks them all up together, and when they go upstairs, they're like all over the place, and so we don't know. I mean, I would recognize your handwriting,
Well,
Mr.
mine
Chairman.
stay in the book, and all.
Well, it's tough because I know on this side of the table, I've been putting stuff that I intend to discard. So when there's a discard pile that is in the same form as notes you want to keep.
Yeah, and when the
Okay,
when the
everything else
clerk
keep in the book.
comes and they picks everything up, and then they go upstairs on the cart and they go in the back room, and then it's like trying to sort out what is what. So that's a thing that we got to work together on.
Charlie, we do try to keep your notes pages. We do notice those.
Let's continue on anyway.
I wasn't finished with what I was saying, but the other part is, during the meeting, you refer back to 2009 stuff,
We need to.
and what happened to ARTs then. It's really not relevant. It's a new
Right.
hearing.
Absolutely.
Right,
I
it
couldn't
is
agree
not
more.
relevant, and also it's really not relevant that the Wetlands Commission approved something because you're not the Wetlands Commission and you have responsibility for drainage.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And the fact that what it was found acceptable in 2009 in the wetland permit is good information to have, but you have to review it on your own. So
Also, the
that's
expertise is different on all sides, too.
Huh?
The expertise of the individuals is entirely different.
so. That's why I kind of like insisted that they make a presentation because you had to at least get a baseline out there.
But that's
Right.
why I asked for
I'm not
the
going to look back
current
10 years and
ART
say,
notes.
well, this is what they
so we
did then.
can
I don't
get
really give a damn what they did then.
Right, it doesn't matter.
This is a
I
new
don't
hearing.
want to know what this board said in 2009.
Right. No, that's
I
right.
want no part of that. I want to know what's happening right now and today.
Well, that's where it is
It
at.
needs
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
clear and
So-
on the record what is going on and why we are looking at an approval for inland wetlands from 2009. And we're looking at that today as we are, as a commission, looking at what's going on. So I think that's an important clarification that out there, people understand this is the deal. This is what's going on. So, and I understand too as a commission member, because I read those notes from 2009 and they are relevant to me and to the plans and to what's going on. So, because a lot of the things that were on there are important as well, which means it's whether I make comments or not, such as it's been addressed already in this, you know, in inland wetlands. So,
Okay, just to move things along a little bit, what is it, is it 10?
10:30.
10:30.
30.
Okay, correspondence, any, there wasn't any, I don't think. No. Roger, the only thing I have is Connecticut mulch. Did they decide they're not going to come in? Are they coming in? Or
Actually, Rick Rosselli was to be meeting with them. I'm not sure if it was today or tomorrow, but they haven't provided what you asked for at the last meeting yet.
Yeah, because the commission wanted to meet with them.
Yeah.
Okay. Any commissioners' correspondence?
Yes.
Yes. Go ahead. Oh, Kenny, go
I
ahead.
feel like I died.
Along the lines of the minute, through the commissioner, a lot of stuff was discussed tonight with this subdivision. And reviewing the minutes 3 months from now for this meeting isn't going to help us at the next meeting. You just approved minutes back from November and December.
We've had
I
this
find
problem.
that, you said that, but it's totally unacceptable and it needs to stop.
Thank you.
I hope to see, I'm going to ask this commission, demand we have our minutes for tonight by next meeting, because we discussed a lot of things. And like you said about reviewing notes, that's our notes, that there's no reason why we shouldn't have them for next meeting. And I would hope they'd be in our packet, and I'm asking the commission to back me up and make sure they're in our packet.
We've been,
Yeah, I think now that we have a dedicated secretary who's, not,
Yeah, I tried to address that
Yeah.
before,
I think she's-
but Commissioner, we did not have clerks. The assistant planners were doing it, working out of job classification. And
I get it, Roger. It
and-
doesn't
and-
matter.
and-
I
and
want the
so-
minutes next
And
meeting.
some of the minutes you approved tonight were
excuses.
done by
Right.
assistant planners.
That's-
In addition to doing their other work, some of our assistant planners have like 200 hours of comp time.
Roger.
In order to do it. So
It's next meeting.
I
That's
know.
it. I don't.
Yeah,
no
I'm
excuses.
just saying, but I'm sensitive to the issue because it's really unfair to staff to berate us for
You're
something that
talking
was
the
not
wrong
our fault.
you're talking to the wrong people.
We already know that.
okay.
Our planners, assistant planners have been out delivering the packets even. I mean, it's
Next,
ridiculous.
next, anything left?
Okay,
Who's next?
Just
go ahead.
two things. First, I want to agree with Commissioner Nelson that we do get these minutes because it is such a big project. And secondly, the Brainerd Road Convenience Store now has sandwich boards out. I go by there every morning. I see sandwich boards and I see lawn signs stuck out there. Like,
Something about the stamps too, that they
yeah, I
accept
mean,
stamps.
there's,
They have their windows are outlined in lights now.
yeah, I mean, first we had the guy across the street with the
Lumber.
the big, and that still isn't completely resolved because that corner looks horrible still. But this guy in the convenience store, sandwich boards, deli signs, it's kind of,
lights.
he's getting out of hand. So that's me.
Yeah, I agree with you. Anyone else?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Okay, first off, the intersection of Broadbrook Road and 190, they're pulling the tanks out. Is anybody doing an environmental study on the gas tanks?
They're already gone.
They yanked them out. Somebody should know if they're leaking.
No, we looked into that issue. It was raised at the previous meeting. I think Commissioner Nelson was one of the ones who asked us to look into that. The requirement on a tank removal is that they file a notice with DEEP and that they notify the local fire marshal. They did file 30 days in advance with DEEP. There's no requirement that they notify anybody else. They did talk to the fire marshal. The fire marshal was on site at the time that they pulled him out. I had a conversation with the gentleman whose business is right across the street, who owns the property, and he is under citation from the code enforcement officers for the condition of that gas station. The further issue is how they left the site after they took the tanks out. They had to have a licensed environmental professional on the site who has to submit that report to DEEP. I did notify the owner of the site that if he plans to come forward to this commission at any point in the future, that he needs to file that LEP report with this commission. He needs to file it with DEP, but rather than us trying chasing it 6 months, 9 months, 2 years from now, that should be filed now. But they did everything that they were required to do as far as notifying DEP and the fire marshal. There's nothing in your regulations or any other regulations of the town that said they had to do anything else. It would be good if they provided notice to the town, but they did not, and they don't have to.
Okay, I was concerned about the DEP for one.
Yeah, the DEP
Flood under there.
relies upon the licensed environmental professional report and the comments from the fire marshal who observes the pulling of the tank and observes the taking of soil samples.
And they did that, right?
They did that.
End of story.
Anyone else?
The tank looked pretty new that they pulled out of the ground.
Is that right?
Yeah, it looked pretty good. Still
I
had
also
stickers on it, and
had a complaint from the public about a lot of times they don't know what we're talking about on some of these lots because they give an address, but they have no idea where it's related to when we're talking on here. And I just thought I'd mention it so maybe you could adjust that somewhere, or somebody could, about what property we're talking about.
We're talking about the corner of Hazard Avenue on Broadbrook.
Road.
Yeah, but I mean, in our meetings in general, they don't know what we're talking about. They watch it and they say it's a very nice show, but.
I sit here and don't know what half you're talking about.
But it's like with the council meetings. In the council, they vote on things and they don't. It's item number so and so on the thing, and nobody knows what the hell they're voting for.
Yeah, you don't know who's getting appointed to what anymore.
Yeah.
I'm still wondering what Scott Copen was appointed to, because I watched that show at the council when I didn't know what they appointed him to.
Yeah, well, it happens all the time, but it's also happening with us.
I know, nobody told us.
That's my point. It's also happening with us.
Rich?
Yeah,
Well, that's a good comment. We'll try to address it.
Okay.
I just want to add that we did have an Economic Development Commission meeting this past week, and we reviewed the Enfield Transit-Oriented Development Plan in terms of the Economic Strategy Plan, the River Access Project, and the Transit Center Rail Station. But they also sort of asked us what we're doing with our regulations and could we speed up our review and our modifications and
The problem there is, Rich, I've asked him to meet with us and keep us informed of what this, and you just mentioned a project, I don't know if this commission's aware of, and that's the first time we've heard of it. And I've, even as Roger said, he knows, I asked him the other day why we haven't had these meetings to be kept up to date, because he can't just come in and tell us. We've got to have a public meeting where he's telling us about these things.
Well, I think everybody's trying to work hard.
Well, I know
trying to work together, and actually, maybe let Rich finish his report, and then I can comment if you want me to.
Well,
but
no, I
think we're on the right track.
I told him that things don't change overnight, and that we're doing it slowly and methodically, so that we are working towards an end. And unfortunately, I forgot about our chicken regulations that we did pass. Otherwise, I could add that. But I think that everybody recognizes that we need to do something, but we're trying to do it in an organized manner where we ultimately come up with a good decision as to what direction we're going. So, with that said, I'm not going to belabor it. I just wanted to say that there's still
the
interest
Riverway
of us
Access Project is the map that I gave out at your first meeting in January, and I remember. Commissioner Nelson telling me that it used to be called Frenchtown. So you have seen that project to the extent that it exists. I provided the maps to Michael that he presented at the Economic Development Commission, so there is coordination.
Between the offices.
And they are scheduled to come back to you. We met with them as staff, meaning Jen and I. We made comments on the map that was handed out at Economic Development. We've asked them, based on our understanding of this commission's direction, to make other changes before they actually come back and present it to this commission. But they will be back before this commission within the next 30 days. What it is at present, remember we talked about the areas in which the town public works garage, what we could do there, what we could do at Strand Theater, what we could do down along the riverfront. So there are areas of focus, and what they're doing at the present time is looking at what you can do under present zoning, and then what perhaps would be consistent with this commission's vision, and then what changes would have to be made to the zoning to move that forward. And that's consistent with everything that I know that this commission is looking for. So I, as your staff, working closely with both Peter Bryanton and Michael Cirillo, I'm comfortable that we're headed in the right direction, and that over the next 3-4 months we're going to have several meetings with this commission, and then this commission will be in the spring holding public meetings with the public, and hopefully we will get to the point where we will be able to adopt new regulations. I mean, there was the meeting that this commission had with the consultants, where I remember the comment from Commissioner Swezak, which is the regulations ought to at least allow what's there now. And we talked about what the density ought to be, starting at the riverfront, low, and then getting higher towards the center. So we have provided, this commission has provided the consultants with direction. So,
well, I wasn't talking about that more. I was talking about the other group and what they're doing and being kept informed of what's going on with them. Because rather than getting hit all at once and trying to do both, and that's what I thought he was talking about.
Well, I mean, I think Rich is your liaison. He goes to those meetings.
I know, but he hears that report. I don't know if he's sitting in on the all the meetings that they're having with the other group and can report on what the other group's doing.
I'm not sure what the other group is. What are you referring to?
Groups.
The economic strategic plan. There's the the group that's doing the review of the code of existing, TOD area, and then there's the recommendations for new economic strategies and changes to regulatory process.
Yes.
So,
Well, that's the same project with a different name, with
right,
an
but-
economic development name when it's at economic development and a planning type name when it's at planning. I mean, pretty much, you've got the gentleman who was doing the marketing aspects, who was just
Right.
working more directly. He came and made a presentation to this commission. He gave you the marketing study, and that marketing study is guiding the work on the various locations in Thompsonville and how we can improve them. So
I don't.
they're
think we
both working together.
got the highlights, so I don't think we actually got a copy of that marketing study, and I'd like to have a copy of that emailed, whatever.
Has it been finalized?
No, this is what I'm talking about, to know.
That the marketing study was finalized, and you're right, we didn't get a final copy of it, and we'll see where that's at and what we can do about it. That's a fair
Perfect.
point.
That would be good.
We said we were going to
you.
be kept informed of where they were at and what was going on.
Easier to hold the conversation that way.
And not
But I
get-
can tell you that there's, to my knowledge, and there's nothing going on that's, that you would be concerned about.
Well, I thought there were two groups. We had our study group and this other study group that Michael was.
No, there's there's on a staff level, there's a coordinating committee. Michael, Peter, myself.
Yeah, but they hired some consultants.
No, this coordinating committee, the consultants were hired by Michael, Peter, and myself.
Right.
And they all work over in the overall direction of Peter Bryington because Peter got the grant.
But aren't there two consultant groups?
Right, but we meet on a regular basis with both of them.
That's with you, but we don't get.
Right, because what we're doing right now is we're following the direction you've given him and putting materials together. And I met with them on their preliminary submittal maybe like a week ago. I'm going to meet with them next week, and then we're going to submit it to you and ask you to schedule a meeting to review it. So it's
What are we
moving along.
reviewing? Your consultant, our consultants, or their consultants?
Well, from my standpoint, it's the town of Enfield, and we're all working together.
I
and
understand that, right, you are. But there are two consultants. They both have come up, or one.
They have
both
both been here, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry?
They've both been here.
Yeah, at the beginning, that's right. And they
Right.
told us what they were going to do.
No, they were here for the marketing report.
And the marketing report they presented, we had a meeting over in the community center at High Street, and Todd presented his findings, and two commissioners at the end are correct. We were promised a report. We don't have that yet.
You're right.
But I just want to get beyond this, they and this, us and them and so forth.
No,
We're all
I just
working
said there are
together.
two
It's the
groups
town of
going.
Enfield. It's fine.
But they had two consulting groups.
Yeah, but I think part of Charlie's concern is we don't want to get bombed with 5 imperative things that we need to address at the same time.
That's right.
If you feel that something is coming, rather than waiting until you have 2 or 3 big changes, maybe start with one and, get the public hearing rolling and then bring on the next one and the next one, so it doesn't end up like the chicken regulations.
That's right.
Right.
That's Charlie's concern.
We're mindful of that, and
I'd like to keep
we're not
informed.
holding any information back. We're not going to come in with a stack like this and say, hold a public hearing and so forth. This isn't going to happen.
All right. Just a question. Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
No, Roger, Roger's finished his report? Or?
No, I have one thing I want to hand out, and you can take it up with us later, but I'd like to give it out and just tell you what it's about.
Okay.
Before Mary cuts her own throat with her fingernails.
I'm getting, you see what they did? They gave me, on either side, they haven't.
Promise tonight.
You're right.
I got my own throat.
My mic is on, be careful.
What does she say now?
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you,
Something I
Roger.
don't want to hear from the late hour.
And I'm going to keep it short. And,
2 minutes.
Oh, boy. Good, good.
So what this is, and take it away, and we'll have further conversations of it, is that there's been a lot of discussion that people want to know when they arrive in the planning office, when will they be done with us? And so this is an attempt to try to say, here's the various processes that we have, here's a time estimate of how long each would take individually. And what we ask people to do is to give us a sketch and a narrative, and then we give them back a little thing that checks off, okay, based on what you've told us, this is what you're going to need to do, and this is how long it takes. It's an attempt because there's no one size fits all. And depending on what you're doing. And the only thing I can say is when people say sometimes, well, things are tied up in the planning office, Prestec project came around a year ago, started with preliminary plans. This is the relocation from New Hampshire. And the planning office has been involved with them for an entire years, but not constantly or all the time. But a project comes in, we took them through wetlands, we took them through planning and zoning. We worked with them on their performance bonds. They got their building permits. We reviewed the building permits. We inspected during construction. We worked with them when they ran into issues with the water tank, and we dealt with the water company on their behalf. We came back to this commission and got permission for an administrative sign-off to a deal with water tanks. They have now constructed it. We now get the as-built back from them, and we review the as-built and approve their certificate of zoning compliance, and they're going to get their CO in the next week, and they're going to have their grand opening. So that's an entire year of going through, but on any given segment of the process, it's a certain time frame. So that's an attempt to continually to explain the process, to put more light on it, so people demystify the process. And we hope that it's responsive, and we look forward to your suggestions and comments on it.
You want to handle it on the...
So, I mean, we can take it up under other business or whatever you want at a later meeting. Or you can, call me up and individually and give me your feedback on it. But it's our attempt to try to explain to somebody, I want to do X, how long is it going to take me?
Well, I think that's been the problem, because we get people that come in and they expect you to do it right tomorrow, just come to us. I'm referring to like McDonald's on the things that you said, how long is it going to take?
Right. And it's difficult, and then members of the council get a complaint from somebody that it takes too long to get through planning, and members of this commission get it. So it's an attempt to explain that, well, there's a whole range of things they could have to do, and there's no way that we can say you arrive at planning on January 12th and you're done by March 15th. It really depends on so many different factors, and so here's our best estimate. and you give us basic information, and we will check all those boxes and help you through it and give you an overall estimate. But then it's dependent upon how timely they are to get us that
Well, I think
information.
the one, the biggest one was the restaurant with their office down in Florida.
Right.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?